Even the weakest of these Jaloin war devils possessed deity transformation stage powers, and they had cultivated powerful devilish arts, so ordinary cultivators were naturally no match for them. However, the unrest on the city wall only lasted for a short time before the chime of a bell rang out, and thousands of streaks of dazzling light suddenly shot forth out of the surrounding buildings. These were all high-grade human cultivators, and they immediately rushed forward to take on the Jaloin war devils. The normal Jaloin war devils didn't pose much of a threat to the high-grade cultivators, but the several tens of Jaloin war devils that were leading from the front were far more powerful than their peers, and even when several high-grade cultivators joined forces to take on each of them, they still managed to brush these obstacles aside and carve out a path of blood as they rushed directly toward Heavenly City. Right at this moment, the ground near the city wall began to tremor violently, and 32 giant golden puppets wielding all types of weapons flew out from underground to oppose these leaders of the Jaloin war devils. All types of treasures hurtled through the air amid a string of resounding explosions, and the puppets and Jaloin war devils seemed to be evenly matched. The golden puppets all had bodies that were as resolute as treasures, and their weapons seemed to be imbued with traces of the power of heaven and earth. Furthermore, they were completely fearless in battle, thereby making them even more formidable. Overall, the devilish army had naturally gained a slight upper hand on the entire battlefield, but with all of the restrictions in Heavenly City, the humans were able to just barely keep the devilish army at bay. Meanwhile, the crimson cloud that the infernal bloodform guards had transformed into was churning and surging incessantly, and the sound of an intense battle could be heard coming from within it. However, not one could see exactly what was happening inside the cloud. As for Fairy Silverlight and Fairy Lin Luan, both of them were being forced into retreat by their opponents, and it seemed that they wouldn't be able to last for very long. The situation was looking very bad for the body integration stage human cultivators. Han Li waved a hand through the air, and 72 azure flying swords swept forth before transforming into azure lotus flowers that rose up into the air, tearing a giant two-headed lion beast into countless pieces in an instant. However, as opposed to being elated by this, Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. Ever since he had been drawn into this strange space inside the Rainbow Pagoda, countless beasts had been manifested by the light around him and were attacking him in relentless waves. Initially, these beasts posed no threat to him at all, and he was able to kill them with ease. However, there seemed to be no end to these beasts, and as soon as one wave was slain, another one would immediately emerge to take its place. Han Li wasn't overly fazed by this. After all, this wasn't the first time that he had found himself in a Shumi treasure, and he was relatively confident that he would be able to escape from it. Thus, he released his 72 flying swords to protect himself from the oncoming beast while searching for a node within this space to force his way out of. However, he quickly discovered that something wasn't right. Just like the restriction within the Devil Sealing Lock, this space seemed to be completely boundless, and even after flying for a long while, he still hadn't found the end of the space. As such, he was forced to stop and think of a way to escape. Looks like I'll only be able to break out of this place through brute force after I find the node in this space, Han Li murmured to himself. Right at this moment, rainbow light flashed around him, and another wave of rainbow beasts emerged. Han Li harumphed coldly, and countless azure lotus flower projections swept forth in all directions, tearing through all of the surrounding beasts in an instant. However, a slightly troubled look appeared in Han Li's eyes. He didn't know whether this was merely a figment of his imagination, but this new wave of beasts seemed to be more powerful than the previous waves. He was still able to kill them with ease, but he had expended slightly more magic power to do so. It was only a very minor difference, but if things continued to progress according to this trend, then the situation really could become rather troublesome. It seemed that he would have to get out of this place as soon as possible before things got out of hand. With that in mind, he immediately pointed a finger toward his own glabella, and black light flashed as an inky black demonic eye appeared. It was none other than the Law Destruction Eye. Having been nurtured by him for so many years, the demonic eye had developed many powerful abilities, and it would be perfect to help him find the most fragile node in this space. Han Li began to make a series of hand seals while chanting something, and black runes began to swirl within the black demonic eye. All of a sudden, the black runes flashed with spiritual light, and a black thread shot forth before vanishing into thin air in a flash. Han Li closed his two eyes, but the third demonic eye was opened as wide as ever as he shot forth through the air as a streak of azure light, flying toward the direction that the black thread had disappeared in. The light up ahead formed a new wave of beasts to stop him, and even though Han Li's eyes were closed, he still had a clear grasp on the situation unfolding before him. All of the azure flying swords around him converged to form a single giant sword at his behest, then slashed through the air with vicious might. A streak of azure light that was over around 1,000 feet in length swept forth, destroying all of the beasts in its path and clearing out a path for Han Li. The magic power within Han Li's body surged forth in a frenzy, and he rushed through the throng of beasts as a streak of azure light, then vanished into the distance after just a few flashes. 4 hours later, Han Li reopened his eyes as he arrived in front of a giant 7-story rainbow pagoda. His expression was filled with incredulity and bewilderment as he examined the structure. This was a giant pagoda that seemed to have been constructed from normal gray stone, and there was a massive eyeball-like crystal ball at the top of the tower. There was a tightly shut stone gate that was around 100 feet tall on the first level of the pagoda, and around 500 meters away from Han Li, there were countless silver ruler projections destroying an endless wave of rainbow beasts. So the spatial node in this place was intentionally hidden. That's quite a smart strategy. It looks like I have no choice but to venture into this pagoda, Han Li murmured to himself before waving a hand through the air, and all of the ruler projections in the distance instantly vanished. In the next instant, silver light flashed in his hand, and a short silver ruler appeared in his grasp. He cast his gaze toward the giant crystal ball up above, then abruptly slashed his silver ruler toward the giant pagoda. Spatial fluctuations surged forth, and a ruler projection that was over 100 feet in length emerged above the pagoda before crashing down with devastating might. Just as the ruler projection was about to strike the crystal ball, a layer of rainbow runes suddenly appeared on the surface of the pagoda, and the ruler projection instantly vanished upon making contact with this layer of runes. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this. He hadn't intentionally made the ruler projection disappear. It had been taken by the restriction on the pagoda. I see, this pagoda is a manifestation of the pagoda treasure on the outside, so there won't be any way for me to destroy it, Han Li murmured to himself in a resigned manner. Azure light then flashed from his body again as he slowly drifted toward the foot of the stone pagoda. Before even reaching the pagoda, Han Li thrust a hand toward the stone gate from afar, and a huge azure hand surfaced before crashing directly into the gate. A dull thump rang out, and the stone gate was pushed open with ease, revealing a passageway that was radiating faint white light. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, but he continued onward and drifted straight into the entrance. Beyond the stone gate was a path paved with blue stone, leading to another stone gate not far up ahead. Blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes as he tried to see directly through the stone gate with his spirit eye ability, but after his spirit eyes penetrated only around a foot into the gate, a layer of golden light suddenly erupted forth. Han Li's eyes were immediately struck by a burst of sharp pain, and there was a peculiar suction force that was making it impossible for him to withdraw his gaze. Han Li was quite alarmed by this, and he reflexively activated his great development technique with all his might. A cool and refreshing sensation surged toward his eyes, and only then was he just barely able to withdraw his gaze. At the same time, an azure figure appeared before him to shield him from the golden light. Even so, Han Li's back had become drenched in cold sweat. He had seen very few restrictions that were as powerful as this one, and that harrowing experience completely rid him of any hint of complacency that he had harbored in his heart. As for the azure figure that had suddenly appeared, that was none other than the spirit body formed by the immortal Zoisha. After contemplating the situation for a moment, he swept a sleeve through the air to release his 13 purple-striped gold-devouring beetles, which revolved in the air above his head along with his 72 azure flying swords. He then flipped his hands over, and the short silver ruler instantly vanished, only to be replaced by 2 small mountains, one black and one azure. In the next instant, golden light flashed from Han Li's body, and he let loose a low cry as his body expanded drastically in size. Strands of golden fur also began to emerge out of his skin, and in the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a giant golden ape. The giant ape abruptly swung both of its arms through the air, and the 2 extreme mountains in its grasp shot forth before crashing heavily into the stone gate amid 2 earth-shattering booms. A layer of golden light surfaced from the golden gate, then exploded like a scintillating golden sun. The restriction formed by the golden light was virtually instantly shattered, and the stone gate was also reduced to dust. Even this incredible profound restriction was no match for his 2 extreme mountains and the extraordinary strength of the giant mountain ape. Han Li abruptly stomped his feet in the ground upon seeing this and propelled himself through the entrance up ahead. All of a sudden, a massive silver fist emerged up ahead before hurtling toward him with ferocious might. Even before it had reached Han Li, he was struck by a burst of enormous invisible force. Han Li was slightly alarmed to see this, but he wasn't fearful in the slightest as he let loose a loud roar, and he lashed out with a massive furry fist of his own in retaliation. Golden light flashed from his fingertips, and his entire hand instantly became as hard as iron and steel. The two fists clashed with a crisp crack, and the silver fist was instantly shattered by the giant ape. Right at this moment, a gust of fierce winds were swept up above Han Li, and a silver set of claws came grabbing toward him from above. Han Li immediately thrust his other golden palm upward in retaliation, and the silver claws were instantly destroyed as well. After doing all that, Han Li still had no intention of stopping. Blue light flashed through his eyes, and he suddenly opened his mouth to expel a pillar of azure light, which instantly struck a patch of empty air over 100 feet away. A loud boom rang out, and a silver figure stumbled out of thin air, revealing itself to be a silver puppet that was missing both of its hands. The puppet was around 20 feet tall with mysterious black runes engraved all over its body, and Han Li made a grabbing motion toward it, upon which 10 streaks of azure sword chi hurtled through the air in a flash. The silver puppet was instantly dismembered on the spot, yet all of a sudden spatial fluctuations erupted throughout the nearby area, and 8 identical silver puppets abruptly emerged. Han Li was slightly alarmed to see this, and the puppets immediately pounced toward him as balls of silver light. An hour later, Han Li let loose a long cry and hurled both of his extreme mountains through the air at once, reducing 2 of the silver puppets to dust. The 2 extreme mountains then vanished on the spot before reappearing in the giant ape's hands, where they disappeared once again. Meanwhile, the 13 purple-striped gold devouring beetles were pursuing a few other silver puppets, and they were quickly felled as well. The giant ape made a hand seal upon seeing this, and it quickly shrank back down to its human form amid a flash of golden light. At this point, the entire space was littered with the remains of silver puppets, of which there were more than 20. Han Li inspected his surroundings with furrowed brows, then turned his gaze toward the air not far away with a grim look in his eyes. These silver puppets were only at around the early deity transformation stage, but a huge number of them had appeared on this level. From the outside, the first level of the pagoda didn't seem all that big, but it had taken him a long while to fly to this point, and he had slain over 100 of these silver puppets along the way. If it weren't for the fact that the silver puppets couldn't even withstand a single attack from him in his giant mountain ape form, and he had released his 13 purple-striped gold devouring beetles as well, it would have taken him quite a while to take care of all of these puppets. This struck Han Li with a sense of foreboding for what was to come. After all, this was only the first level. With that in mind, Han Li cast his gaze upward again, and around 600 to 700 feet up above, everything had been concealed by a layer of gray mist. He had considered taking a shortcut by breaking through this layer of mist to the second level, but he was concerned that forcing his way through this place would damage the hidden spatial node, so he could only give up on that plan. If the spatial node had already fused as one with the pagoda, then it would not be a good idea to act so recklessly. Even as he was thinking, Han Li continued to fly toward the staircase up ahead, followed closely by the 13 purple-striped gold devouring beetles. After just a few flashes, the azure streak of light vanished from view, and a short while after that, an elegant figure emerged amid a flash of golden light. This was none other than the middle-aged beauty, who was one half of the yin-yang twin devils. She was looking at the staircase that Han Li had just scaled with a hint of wariness in her eyes. It's a good thing I followed him in here. Otherwise, with his true spirit transformation and those powerful spirit insects of his, this place really may not be enough to trap him, the devilish beauty murmured to herself before raising a hand to summon a silver formation plate. A burst of silver light was released by the formation plate, then swept up the devilish beauty, upon which she vanished on the spot. On the second level, 2 silver puppets that were slightly larger than those on the first level were reduced to piles of scrap metal by streaks of azure sword chi. These puppets were very similar in appearance to those that had appeared on the first level, but these ones possessed roughly mid-deity transformation stage power. Han Li continued to fly onward expressionlessly with his 13 spirit insects, leaving piles of silver remains in his wake. On the third level, around 10 late deity transformation stage puppets surrounded Han Li before pouncing toward him in unison. On the fourth level. On the seventh level, Han Li drifted forward, and a slightly peculiar look appeared on his face. The puppets on the fourth level were at the early spatial tempering stage, but they numbered far fewer than the puppets on the previous levels. The puppets on the 5th and 6th levels were at the mid-spatial tempering stage and late spatial tempering stage, respectively. The puppets on the 6th level were far more difficult to deal with than those on the previous levels, and Han Li had been forced to unleash several types of powerful abilities to destroy them. According to the trend, there was a very good chance that the puppets on the 7th level would be at the body integration stage, so Hanli had mentally prepared himself for a grueling battle. The giant azure sword that Hanli had directed toward the light barrier had failed to do anything as he had been distracted by that sneak attack just now, but with the 13 purple-striped gold devouring beetles devouring spiritual power to their heart's content, the barrier still collapsed in the end. The 13 purple-striped gold devouring beetles immediately pounced toward the 2 rainbow puppets, and a series of resounding clashes ensued. The 2 puppets had released silver arcs of lightning and bursts of yellow light that both seemed to be imbued with incredible power. In the face of the puppets' attacks, the purple-striped gold devouring beetles were completely fearless and swarmed directly into the lightning and yellow light. Loud thunderclaps instantly rang out as the arcs of lightning exploded, and even the surrounding air was giving off a slightly charred scent. As for the yellow light, there were countless runes swirling within it, and it instantly swept up the purple-striped gold devouring beetles before becoming significantly brighter. However, these 13 purple-striped gold devouring beetles were all beetle monarch candidates that had arisen from tens of thousands of gold devouring beetles, so they were far more powerful than the average being could imagine. Regardless of whether they were struck by lightning or swept up by yellow runes, the purple-striped gold devouring beetles managed to remain completely unscathed, and they quickly flew over to the 2 puppets before pouncing on them in a vicious manner. The 2 rainbow puppets didn't possess any emotions, so they naturally had no fear. Rainbow light swirled around their bodies, and one of them produced a pair of long transparent blades, while the other summoned a rainbow spear that was around 20 feet in length. As the 3 weapons were swung through the air, countless blade and spear projections emerged to sweep up the 13 purple-striped gold devouring beetles. A string of erratic clangs rang out, and even though the purple-striped gold devouring beetles remained completely unharmed, they were unable to approach the 2 puppets either. Han Li's expression darkened slightly as he looked on from the distance, and all of a sudden, he let loose a long roar, and the extreme essence-fused mountain in the air above instantly vanished on the spot. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted above the 2 puppets, and the black mountain emerged before sending a burst of gray light raining down from above. The 2 puppets were completely fearless as they continued to sweep their weapons through the air while raising their heads to face the oncoming gray light. They then opened their mouths to unleash 2 pillars of rainbow light, and rainbow and gray light intertwined with one another as the 2 clashed. Right at this moment, a pair of translucent wings appeared on Han Li's back, and his enormous ape body instantly vanished with a flap of those wings amid a flash of silver lightning. Almost at the exact same moment, spatial fluctuations erupted behind the 2 puppets, and the giant ape abruptly emerged before swinging its arms through the air. The rainbow light in front of the 2 puppets shuddered, and 2 furry golden fists emerged, both of which were radiating shimmering golden light. The giant ape had plunged its massive fists straight through the bodies of the 2 puppets at an incredible speed. The 2 puppets did indeed possess early body integration stage power, but they didn't possess high-level intelligence, nor the spiritual sense of living cultivators, so they were unable to immediately react to Han Li, who had appeared behind them. At the same time, the unique advantages of being a puppet shone through here. If a normal living being were to sustain such a severe wound, they would most likely lose the ability to continue to battle. However, the 2 puppets seemed to have been completely unaffected, and they immediately swung their weapons toward the giant ape behind them. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, and a dull thump suddenly rang out from his fists, releasing 2 bursts of silver flames that completely enveloped the pair of rainbow puppets. A cold light flashed through his eyes, and he vanished on the spot amid a flash of lightning. The more fearsome his opponent was, the greater the necessity for Han Li to kill him as quickly as possible. This was the best course of action for both himself and the entire human army in Heavenly City. Fei Ye's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing this, but he then harumphed coldly, and the translucent flying daggers hovering before him shot forth high up into the air. The daggers converged up above to form the same translucent giant blade, while Fei Ye stomped a foot into the air and shot forth as a streak of translucent light. The streak of light then fused as one with the massive blade, and it slashed toward the azure coiled dragon in a vicious manner. This giant blade was almost twice as powerful as the previous one, and before it had even made contact with the coiled dragon, the entire surrounding air had already been filled with glacial light. However, the azure dragon wasn't fearful in the slightest upon seeing this. The scales all over its body stood up on end, and it transformed into a vast expanse of azure light that clashed with the giant blade. Glacial light and azure light intertwined as they clashed in a ferocious manner, and the two seemed to be evenly matched. Right at this moment, silver lightning flashed, and Hanli appeared up above before immediately grabbing downward with both hands. Two giant hands that were each several tens of feet in size emerged out of thin air. One of them was as pristine white as jade with layers of 5-colored glacial flames around it, while the other was as black as ink and was enveloped in a layer of silver flames. The two giant hands thrust downward and glacial and scorching powers intertwined, creating a strange combination that enhanced rather than weakened one another. Glacial light flashed down below, and Feya emerged before transforming into a giant frosty hand that rose up into the air. This hand was as translucent as ice, and the entire surrounding space congealed in the face of its glacial powers. The three massive hands clashed violently, and the 5-colored flames around the giant white hand were immediately snuffed out, following which the hand itself was shattered. However, the glacial power emanating from the giant frosty hand was also nullified somewhat, and it shrank slightly in size. After that, the inky black hand clashed with the glacial hand, and the spirit engulfing heavenly flames immediately enveloped the giant frosty hand. Not only was all of its glacial power nullified, the frosty hand began to melt at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. Right before all of the glacial power was depleted, a burst of glacial light shot forth out of the silver flames before flying away like lightning. However, it was followed by a thin golden and silver thread that vanished into the glacial light in a flash. If someone below the body integration stage had been infected by the poison of the revolving evil spirit light, they would have already been killed, and he was only able to last this long as he was able to forcibly repress the poison with his mid-body integration stage powers. The young man faltered slightly at the sight of the aura integration beast before murmuring to himself in a surprised manner, "To think there's an aura integration beast present. No wonder all of you still haven't won this battle yet. I just so happen to require a steed, I guess you'll suffice." As soon as his voice trailed off, the young man flipped a hand over, and a small purple cauldron appeared over his palm amid a flash of purple light. The young man laid a hand onto the cauldron, and uttered the word, "Net." The cauldron immediately began to revolve on the spot, and an ancient rune emerged from within it amid a flash of black light, then shot forth directly toward the aura integration beast. The aura integration beast opened its mouth to expel a gust of ferocious yellow winds upon seeing this, and at the same time, its wings transformed into a yellow cloud that completely concealed its entire body. The giant beast then hurtled directly toward the black rune without any pause, and it was quite clear that it was very confident in its own defensive abilities. A cold smile appeared on sacred ancestor Shuiguang's face upon seeing this, and he also made no effort to take evasive measures. After just a few flashes, the black runes flew directly into the yellow cloud and vanished without a trace. In the next instant, a thunderous roar of shock and horror rang out, and the giant beast was completely immobilized in midair. There were countless black threads that had bound its body, and these threads were extremely thin, but the beast was unable to break free from them no matter how much it thrashed and struggled. A cold smile appeared on the sacred ancestor Shuiguang's face upon seeing this, and he suddenly turned toward Hanli. Hanli immediately shuddered as a chill ran down his spine, and sacred ancestor Shuiguang remained completely expressionless, but he suddenly waved a hand toward Hanli. At the same time he uttered the word, "Come." A burst of rumbling rang out as the giant rainbow pagoda nearby abruptly rose up into the air, then vanished into thin air in a flash. In the next instant, bright rainbow light erupted over sacred ancestor Shuiguang's palm, and a miniature pagoda appeared above his hand before being tossed toward the aura integration beast. He then made a hand seal, and the pagoda transformed into a burst of rainbow light that instantly inundated the giant beast. When the rainbow light reverted back to its pagoda form, the aura integration beast was nowhere to be seen. Almost at the exact same moment, Fairy Lin Luan exclaimed in a panicked voice, "My talisman can no longer sense the aura integration beast." Han Li's heart immediately sank upon hearing this. The 6 balls crashed into the purple light barrier amid a string of dull thumps, only to be instantly absorbed by the light barrier. However, the canoe was still stopped for an instant as a result. Sacred ancestor Shuiguang quickly recovered from his astonishment, and his expression darkened as he raised a hand before drawing a peculiar-looking circle in the air. A large white hole instantly appeared in front of the small canoe, and crimson light flashed as a massive python shot forth out of the hole. The python pierced through the golden-armored warrior's body before winding itself around the puppet. The armored warrior didn't even get a chance to react before it was crushed into specks of silver light by the python, and the golden projection behind it also crumbled away as a result. Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang harumphed coldly, and he was just about to continue onward when he abruptly looked up with a slightly bewildered expression. In the air above the canoe, the projection of a series of palaces and pavilions had appeared. This was none other than the 9 palaces heavenly talisman that Han Li had set up earlier. In the instant that Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang discovered this, a vast expanse of light had already descended from above to ensnare the crimson canoe. In response, the final clone on the canoe hurled his rainbow pagoda through the air again. A giant pagoda projection instantly appeared overhead, keeping the palaces and pavilions at bay, and preventing them from being able to descend any further. Immediately thereafter, the clone began to chant something before expelling a mouthful of blood essence, then yelled the word, "Capture." Rainbow light instantly swept upward from the tip of the pagoda, sweeping up all of the palaces and pavilions. The light faded, and the giant pagoda projection vanished as the small rainbow pagoda returned to the clone's hand. Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang's heart immediately eased upon seeing this, and he spurred on the crimson canoe to continue traveling forward. Over at Heavenly City, all of the restrictions outside the city wall had finally been destroyed by the devilish army, and countless devilish cavaliers and devilish beasts were flooding into the city. However, the 108 golden armored warriors continued to hover in midair in a stationary manner. It turned out that they were mere projections that had been conjured up by a series of intricate formations. The human army had discovered this not long ago, and morale naturally plummeted once again as everyone fled for their lives. At this moment, on a nameless mountain hundreds of kilometers away from Heavenly City, there were close to 1,000 people in identical attire casting their eyes toward Heavenly City, which had been inundated by devilish chi. Some of them wore grief-stricken expressions, while others were happy to just be alive. None of them uttered a single word, and it seemed that this was quite an organized and well-trained group. Standing in front of them was an azure-robed middle-aged man, and he was also appraising Heavenly City with a complex expression. He was none other than one of the grand elders of Heavenly City, Master Azure Dragon. "Let's go, there's no saving Heavenly City at this point. You are the seeds of our 4 sects. As long as Deep Heaven City can withstand the devilish tribulation, our 4 sects will rise again someday," Master Azure Dragon said in a solemn voice as he turned to the group of cultivators before him. Just as Master Azure Dragon was departing from Heavenly City with the best disciples of the 4 major sects using a secret formation, Han Li had fallen into a very perilous situation. He was astonished to sense that his armor origin talismans and 9 palaces heavenly talisman had all been quickly destroyed by his pursuer, and his heart sank even further. Han Li hadn't expected to completely trap Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang with those talismans, but never did he think that they would fail to stall him for even a short time. Furthermore, both of these talismans had been destroyed virtually in the instant that they had been activated. Even Han Li wouldn't be capable of something like this. This meant that this clone of Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang that he was being pursued by was more powerful than him, and even if he were to use his most powerful trump cards, his chances of securing victory still definitely wouldn't exceed 50%. As such, Han Li was naturally unwilling to engage his pursuer in direct battle. After all, defeat would result in death for him, and even if he were to win, he would only be ridding Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang of a clone. This was naturally not a trade that he was willing to take. Thus, after realizing that his pursuer was far more powerful than he had imagined, he immediately began to ponder strategies that would allow him to escape. He didn't know what Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang's sensory range was, but with the fearsome spiritual sense that Grand Ascension cultivators possessed, there was definitely no chance for him to escape Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang's tracking unless he could somehow open up a distance of tens of thousands of kilometers between them. However, with how comparable their speeds were, there was no feasible way for Han Li to open up that much distance between them. Unbeknownst to Han Li, Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang was also extremely stunned by the situation. The crimson canoe he was using was a vastly renowned flying treasure in the Elder Devil realm, and at its top speed, it could even keep up with a Grand Ascension stage being. Due to the fact that this was a clone as opposed to his true body, he was unable to push the canoe to its top speed, but it was definitely still traveling far faster than a normal body integration cultivator. However, even after pursuing Han Li for such a long time, he still hadn't managed to close down the distance between them by much. Thankfully, there were 3 of them, and they could take turns to drive the canoe on a rotating basis, so they didn't have to worry about exhausting their magic power. As such, even though the 3 of them were quite frustrated by this lengthy chase, they were still quite calm and confident. In contrast, Han Li was naturally unable to keep this up for too long. Maintaining his Tianping transformation and thunderstorm wings while flying at top speed was depleting his magic power at a rapid rate, and at his cultivation base, his magic power regeneration pills were no longer all that effective. At this rate, even if he were to constantly take pills and absorb spiritual power from top-grade spirit stones, his magic power would still be completely exhausted in 5 to 6 days at most. As such, this was quite a concerning situation for Han Li. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Han Li, and his eyes immediately lit up. Now that I think about it, Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang is pursuing me for that devil sealing lock, so if I'm willing to discard this treasure, I may be able to shake him off my tail. However, his brows then furrowed slightly in hesitation. This was an incomplete profound heavenly treasure, and if Che Qigong hadn't been lying to him, then the chaotic yin-yang qi that he could secure using this treasure would be immensely beneficial to him. As such, he was naturally very reluctant to relinquish it. "Humph, how insolent," the young man at the forefront said in an arrogant manner before making a hand seal, and a burst of black qi erupted behind him. 2 gray feelers then sprang out of the black qi before thrusting directly toward the pair of massive hands. The feelers struck the giant hands like a pair of iron spears, and in the instant that the two clashed, the pair of massive hands exploded like balloons before disintegrating into specks of spiritual light. However, the divine essence-fused light and 5-colored glacial flames imbued within the 2 hands continued to sweep down from above. As a result, one of the feelers was frozen into a translucent pillar of ice, while the other was shattered amid a few violent flashes of gray light. "Divine essence-fused light, eh? That's very rare," the young man at the forefront remarked in a slightly taken aback manner. A cold smile appeared on Han Li's face as he said, "Do you really think a mere clone like you is enough to force me to flee for my life? I was only trying to distance myself from your subordinates." "You seem very confident. Does your confidence stem from those 2 that are hiding in the shadows?" The young man at the forefront chuckled coldly. Almost at the exact same moment, the 2 clones behind him suddenly sprang into action. One of them opened his mouth to expel a ball of black light, which instantly transformed into a small cauldron, and a black pillar of light suddenly erupted out of the cauldron's opening. Meanwhile, the other clone made a grabbing motion, and an indistinct rainbow pagoda projection emerged before flying through the air. The 2 treasures were both attacking what appeared to be patches of empty air. A pair of resounding booms rang out, and 2 figures emerged out of thin air amid busts of spatial fluctuations. One of them was a shimmering golden figure with 3 heads and 6 arms, while the other was the green-skinned Han Li, and they were preparing to stealthily approach the small crimson canoe. Han Li's expression immediately darkened upon seeing this. A peculiar look appeared on Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang's face as he caught sight of the golden body. "That's a true devil projection. How interesting, to think that a human was able to hone a true devil cultivation art to such an extent. I wonder what those old geezers will think if they were to hear of this." He chuckled with both a hint of mockery and self-deprecation in his voice. Han Li wasn't overly surprised to hear this. After all, even though he had altered the Provenance True Devil arts significantly, the Provenance True Devil projection had a very distinct form, so anyone who was well-versed in devilish arts would be able to identify its origins right away. Of course, there were very few human devil Dao cultivators who would have mastered a devilish cultivation art to this extent, so under normal circumstances Han reflexively refrained from using this golden body. However, the tip of the spear only managed to pierce several inches into the golden body's body chest before being stopped cold in its tracks. At the same time, 6 golden blades appeared in the golden body's hands again before being slashed toward the massive spear. The devilish projection down below seemed to have also sensed that something was amiss, and it immediately attempted to withdraw the giant spear, but it was already too late. A layer of translucent light appeared over the surface of the Provenance golden body, and a burst of immense suction force immediately acted upon the giant spear, thereby completely immobilizing it. Right at this moment, countless blade projections rained down from the 6 golden blades being wielded by the golden body, and the projections came crashing down in a torrential wave that threatened to inundate both the devilish projection and Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang. Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang harumphed coldly upon seeing this before taking a half-step backward, then made a strange hand seal that was accompanied by an unintelligible incantation. A buzzing sound rang out from the small canoe, and a crimson light barrier emerged to protect both Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang and the devilish projection. The blade projections rained down upon the light barrier like a violent storm, but the barrier remained completely stable and unscathed. Not only was this canoe an extremely powerful flying treasure, it also possessed incredible defensive abilities. It was no wonder that sacred ancestor Shui Guang was so calm and collected in the face of the Providence Golden Body's attacks. All of a sudden, the devilish projection raised its head and let loose a low roar, upon which a layer of gray light flashed over the giant spear that was immobilized against the Golden Body's chest. As a result, the spear softened and transformed into a gray devilish python that was several hundred feet in length. The python had an inky black horn on its head, and it lashed out with its massive body to wind itself tightly around the Golden Body. If a normal body integration cultivator had been caught in the python's stranglehold, their body would instantly explode. However, the Providence Golden Body was manifested from countless precious materials, and it was virtually indestructible. As such, not only did it manage to remain completely unscathed even as it was bound by the giant python, it suddenly began to expand. At the same time, the 6 golden blades it was wielding vanished in a flash, and as it waved its 6 arms through the air, countless golden fist projections were sent hurtling toward the massive python. A string of rumbling booms rang out, and the giant python also seemed to possess an extremely resolute body. Even though it was sustaining some damage from the golden fist projections, it was able to withstand the blows without too much trouble. In retaliation, it opened its mouth and expelled a burst of green chi directly toward one of the golden body's 3 heads. The green chi immediately struck the golden body with an overpowering sense of drowsiness, and the expressions on its 3 faces changed slightly as golden light suddenly flashed from its glabella. A gash was then opened up and a 3rd vertical eye emerged. Golden light flashed, and 3 streaks of piercing golden light shot forth from within the vertical eye before passing through the green chi in a flash. Strangely enough, the green chi was completely eradicated as a result. The giant python swung its head around and attempted to chomp down viciously onto the golden body's center head, but a huge shimmering golden hand appeared in its path before lashing out in retaliation. Thus, the golden body and the massive python began to engage in a melee brawl, and both of them possessed extremely powerful bodies, so it seemed that this was going to be quite a long battle. Han Li was struck by a sense of foreboding upon seeing this, and the 13 purple-striped gold-devouring beetles that were revolving above his head instantly shot forth as balls of purple light at his behest. Meanwhile, Han Li himself stomped a foot onto space, and he pounced through the air as a gust of fierce winds while unleashing a torrential flurry of golden fist projections. However, regardless of whether it was the purple-striped gold-devouring beetles or the fist projections, both were instantly repelled as soon as they came into contact with the rainbow halos. At this moment, the power of laws in the nearby area became even more pronounced. The dazzling light that was being released by the rainbow halos illuminated the entire sky, striking the beholder with an extremely unsettling sensation. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, and as he continued to hurtle through the air, he let loose a ferocious roar, and his body began to expand at an incredible rate. Within mere moments, he had swelled to around 4,000 to 5,000 feet tall, and he took in a massive lungful of air before expelling a wave of white chi. Initially, the wave of chi was completely silent, but after traveling for around 100 feet, an earth-shattering boom suddenly erupted from it. The 3 clones felt as if an explosive thunderclap had erupted right beside their ears, and they swayed unsteadily as their bodies shuddered. The space in the wake of the white wave began to turn murky and indistinct, and there were even some sections that were twisting and warping, as if the entire space were about to collapse. This was the Golden Net Roar, a new giant mountain ape ability that Han Li had mastered after progressing to the mid-body integration stage. This was a purely soundwave-based cultivation art, and it was incredibly powerful. When unleashed to its full extent, it was capable of even shattering space itself. This was another countermeasure that Han Li had prepared against the Rainbow Light Pagoda, and in this perilous situation, he immediately chose to unleash the technique. The white sound waves and rainbow light clashed, and the former instantly vanished soundlessly into the latter. A loud buzzing sound then rang out from the rainbow light, and the golden runes hovering within the light disintegrated in a flash. The golden light itself also began to flash erratically, as if it were about to shatter at any moment. The clone that had just returned to his senses from the soundwave attack hurriedly made a hand seal upon seeing this to control the small pagoda again, but he had fallen a step behind Han Li. All of a sudden, countless silver runes appeared over the Providence Golden Body at Han Li's behest, giving it a very mystical appearance. The giant gray python pounced viciously toward it, but it abruptly vanished like a gentle breeze. Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang faltered slightly upon seeing this, but just as he was about to rush over to the massive python and unleash some kind of powerful ability to take care of the golden body, a buzzing sound suddenly rang out, and his heart stirred as he hurriedly cast his gaze toward the direction the sound was coming from. There he discovered 13 huge beetles flying directly toward him while opening their mouths to expel plumes of purple threads. These spirit insects had been instructed by Han Li to sneak over to Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang, who immediately swept a hand toward them without any hesitation. The sea of blood down below howled as a massive wave rose up right in front of Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang. However, the huge wave only managed to stop a small proportion of the purple threads expelled by the beetles, while the majority of the threads pierced directly through to the other side, then reached Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang in the blink of an eye. Right at this moment, a faint green shadow flashed in the air above the ball. The spirit body had already arrived there in advance, and it suddenly tossed an object toward the ball with a solemn look on its face. At first glance, the object appeared to be an ordinary scroll. The scroll flew over to the air above the green ball, where it slowly unfurled to reveal a piece of artwork depicting countless golden flying swords. This was none other than the myriad sword artwork that Han Li had only completely refined not long ago. As soon as the scroll was unfurled, it released a burst of dazzling golden light alongside an astonishing baleful aura. The golden light then vanished in a flash, and the green ball in front of the artwork also disappeared. It had been drawn into the artwork. A faint smile appeared on the spirit body's face, and it made a hand seal, upon which the golden artwork slowly rolled up into the scroll again, then hovered in midair in a completely stationary manner. Han Li waved a hand upward, and a resounding boom rang out as a vast expanse of light erupted from the palatial projections up above. The light swept down toward the scroll before drawing it into the projections, following which plumes of dense white mist emerged to conceal all of the palatial projections in the air above. Meanwhile, within the restriction formed by the 9 palaces' heavenly talisman, the myriad sword artwork tremored violently, and a layer of golden light swirled around it before it slowly began to unfurl again. However, the scroll had only managed to open up halfway before a giant rainbow pagoda projection erupted out of it, and an earth-shattering boom rang out as the scroll exploded into countless specks of golden light. Immediately thereafter, a small ball of rainbow light emerged, and it was none other than the Rainbow Light Pagoda. On the surface of the pagoda, the indistinct image of a pale face could be seen. It belonged to none other than the clone of Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang, who had fused as one with the pagoda. The paleness of his complexion and the furious look on his face clearly indicated that he had been forced to expend a lot of power to break out of the scroll. However, before the Rainbow Pagoda had a chance to unleash any other abilities, the specks of golden light that had erupted from the explosion suddenly became extremely bright and dazzling. A sharp ringing sound rang out, and a series of golden flying swords emerged out of thin air around the small pagoda. Each and every shimmering golden sword was of an identical length and appearance, and there was no end to them in sight. The entire area had transformed into a sea of swords, and golden light encompassed the entirety of the nearby space. The face on the small pagoda couldn't help but falter slightly upon seeing this. In the next instant, all of the flying swords let loose sharp ringing sounds, then swiveled around to direct their tips at the Rainbow Pagoda with unerring accuracy. Crap! Even the perpetually calm clone's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. Immediately thereafter, the golden flying swords in the surrounding area shot forth toward the small pagoda in a torrential storm. The rainbow light around the small pagoda did indeed possess remarkable defensive abilities, but it still immediately began to struggle in the face of so many attacks at once. Of course, the clone that had fused as one with the pagoda wasn't just going to stand by idly and watch, but in the face of this barrage of ferocious attacks, there was no time for him to unleash any other abilities. In the end, he could only inject an enormous burst of spiritual power into the Rainbow Pagoda, thereby stabilizing the layer of rainbow light again and repelling all of the flying swords in the immediate vicinity. However, there seemed to be no end to these golden flying swords. Just as the clone thought that he could take a moment to catch his breath, the next wave of flying swords arrived, and soon the layer of rainbow light was beginning to waver again. As such, he was forced to inject magic power into the pagoda again to bolster its defenses. As a result, the small pagoda was trapped on the spot and unable to do anything aside from passively defend. Han Li could sense what was happening within the restriction formed by the 9 palaces' heavenly talismans, and he was very elated by what he saw. He immediately let loose a loud roar and pounced toward Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang, who was battling the 13 purple-striped gold devouring beetles. Spiritual light flashed from the spirit body down below, and it also began to fly toward the same target, but in the next instant, a streak of crimson light suddenly appeared in the distance before approaching at a rapid speed. Within the streak of crimson light was none other than the clone of sacred ancestor Shui Guang that had been tasked with chasing down the purple word cauldron. Han Li didn't know whether the clone had managed to recover the cauldron, but he was flying directly back towards sacred ancestor Shui Guang. Stop him. Han Li immediately issued an instruction through his spiritual sense to his spirit body upon seeing this. Thus, the spirit body instantly changed directions and flew toward the approaching clone instead. A cold light flashed through the clone's eyes upon seeing this, and he immediately flicked his fingers toward the spirit body. 10 crimson threads shot forth from his fingertips in a flash, and these crimson threads instantly transformed into thick pillars of crimson light that hurtled directly toward the spirit body. At the same time, the clone opened his mouth to expel a burst of black flames. The spirit body's powers were clearly inferior to those of the clone, but it wasn't about to back down. It also opened its mouth to expel a plume of green threads, then produced a short silver ruler with a flick of its wrist. The ruler was waved through the air, and countless silver ruler projections were instantly conjured up before surging toward the clone like a silver wave. As a result, the clone was stopped in his tracks and unable to advance any further. Meanwhile, Han Li's 3 heads had begun to chant in unison, and he swept his 6 arms through the air, releasing countless silver runes that drifted towards sacred ancestor Shui Guang. These runes then instantly manifested into bursts of tremendous force. Sacred ancestor Shui Guang had initially thought that Han Li would be completely preoccupied with battling his clone, but much to his astonishment, Han Li had been able to trap the Rainbow Light Pagoda, as well as the clone controlling it, in that massive formation up above. Due to the fact that the 3 of them had been sent into an alternate realm, their powers were nowhere near those of their true body. On top of that, there were some powerful treasures that they were unable to bring into the spirit realm, but with the Rainbow Light Pagoda and Purple Word Cauldron in their arsenal, they should have been able to crush all beings below the Grand Ascension stage in the spirit realm. However, he didn't think that their primary target would be this troublesome to deal with. First, the Purple Word Cauldron had somehow escaped his control, and now the Rainbow Light Pagoda had been completely suppressed by Han Li's spirit body. If it weren't for the fact that he could still sense that the clone controlling the Rainbow Pagoda was fine and still had a good chance of escaping the restriction, he would have most likely already turned around and made a tactical retreat. Even so, he was still becoming a little concerned. However, now that he was being attacked by Han Li, a hint of ferocity welled up in his heart to override his worry. He immediately swept a hand through the air, and the 8 crimson ghostly projections that were battling the purple-striped gold-devouring beetles instantly vanished. The 8 azure ghostly heads then let loose ghastly howls in unison before detaching themselves from one another, then disappeared into sacred ancestor Shui Guang's body in a flash. In the next instant, he made a hand seal, and crimson light flashed from his body as he began to swell drastically in size, transforming into a giant that was not much smaller than the massive golden ape. 8 bursts of black chi also erupted from his shoulders, following which 8 ghostly azure heads emerged. These 8 heads were each displaying a different emotion, and they were extremely harrowing to behold. The devilish giant let loose a roar of fury and swept his arms through the air like the spokes of a wagon wheel, sending countless claw projections hurtling through the air. At the same time, the 8 heads opened their mouths to expel bursts of black chi. The black chi converged in the air to form a huge black flower, which clashed with the oncoming burst of tremendous force. The giant flower shuddered before it was instantly crushed into nothingness by the enormous force, but it also nullified most of that power. The remaining force was then countered by the ferocious claw projections. A cold light flashed through Han Li's 6 eyes upon seeing this, and he suddenly let loose a thunderous roar that made the devilish giant sway unsteadily on the spot. Golden light flashed, and a sword projection that was around a foot in length suddenly appeared right in front of the devilish giant. The devilish giant was still a little dizzy, and he was quite startled by this attack, but he still reacted very quickly as his hand shot forth like lightning to make a grab for the sword projection. However, in the instant that his hand closed around the sword projection, it merely vanished as if it were nothing more than an illusion. The devilish giant naturally faltered slightly upon seeing this, yet before he had a chance to figure out what Han Li's attack was all about, the sword projection suddenly re-emerged in his spiritual sense before descending in a vicious strike. Arg! A burst of excruciating pain shot through the devilish giant's soul, and he involuntarily threw his hands over his head as he let loose a howl of agony. This was none other than an ability that Han Li had mastered from the sword observation art he had derived from the myriad sword artwork, and it specialized in targeting one's spiritual sense. Unfortunately, this was a true immortal realm cultivation art and was not something that he could use without any consequences. As such, he was struck with a certain degree of backlash as well, and if it weren't for the fact that he had combined his golden body with his giant mountain ape form, he wouldn't have dared to use it in battle. Even so, he still gave a muffled groan as golden and silver runes flashed over his body, and he seemed to have sustained even more damage than the devilish giant. However, Han Li was prepared for this backlash, and even though his 3 heads were also struck by a burst of sharp pain, he managed to repress the pain and sprang through the air as he let loose a low roar. After just a single flash, he covered a distance of over 1,000 feet and appeared directly above the devilish giant. A long golden blade then emerged within each of his 6 hands before being slashed viciously toward the devilish giant's main head. Golden light flashed, and the 6 golden blades instantly fused as one to create a giant sword that was several hundred feet in length. A cold light flashed through the air, and a hint of incredulity appeared on the devilish giant's main head, following which it slowly tumbled down from the devilish giant's neck. He had just been decapitated. However, Han Li didn't display any elation upon seeing this. Instead, the giant swords in his hands split up into 6 golden blades again, and he slashed them rapidly through the air, unleashing countless golden threads that threatened to tear the devilish giant into countless pieces. An incredible turn of events unfolded. The decapitated devilish giant abruptly flapped its 4 wings and shot back several hundred feet in a flash. At the same time, the sea of blood down below churned violently, and countless arrows of blood shot up into the air to keep the oncoming golden threads at bay. At the same time, a burst of black chi emerged from his neck, and a head that was identical to his original one appeared. However, one of the 8 azure ghostly heads on his shoulders had vanished. Han Li's expression darkened upon seeing this, but he didn't falter in the slightest as the 6 golden blades in his hands transformed into 6 completely different types of weapons. He swept the 6 weapons through the air, and countless bursts of golden lightning and fire swept forth in a frenzy, hurtling directly toward the devilish giant in the distance. Having just lost one of his heads, the devilish giant was also extremely enraged, and his remaining 7 heads began to chant in unison as he made an extremely profound hand seal. All of a sudden, the sea of blood down below began to rotate rapidly with the devilish giant at the center, forming a massive vortex that transformed into a gigantic pillar of blood. The pillar of blood erupted into the heavens, and the devilish giant withdrew his hand seal before grabbing toward it. Light flashed erratically from the pillar of blood, and it transformed into a giant crimson staff that was several thousand feet in length with black runes engraved all over its surface. The devilish giant grabbed onto the staff before immediately swinging it toward Han Li with devastating force. Countless staff projections instantly swept forth as a crimson hurricane, carrying with it a repugnant odor of blood and gore. The golden lightning and fire intertwined with the hurricane amid a string of resounding explosions, and Han Li raised all 6 of his weapons in unison before charging directly toward the devilish giant. The devilish giant harumphed coldly and also charged toward the massive ape. Thus, the 2 colossal beings clashed in a fierce battle that threatened to lay waste to heaven and earth. Not long after their battle commenced, the 13 purple-striped gold-devouring beetles and the giant gray python also joined in. That naturally made the battle even more intense, and all of a sudden, a ball of vibrant colorful light suddenly emerged right at the center of the battlefield. Immediately thereafter, a burst of astonishing fluctuations proliferated outward in all directions, collapsing the space in its wake. 2 figures stumbled out of the ball of light before flying backward, and only when a distance of 2,000 to 3,000 feet had been opened up between them did they just barely manage to stabilize themselves. These 2 figures were naturally none other than Han Li and the devilish giant, and both of them were looking rather disheveled. Not only were there large patches of golden fur on Han Li's body that had been charred black, only 3 of his 6 weapons remained, and even those 3 weapons had been severely damaged. As for the devilish giant, his entire body was covered in blood, and 2 more of the ghostly heads on his shoulders had been destroyed. As for the clone that was battling the spirit body in the distance, it seemed to have also received the instruction to retreat, and dazzling crimson light suddenly erupted from its body to force back the spirit body before it shot forth toward its 2 companions. The 3 of them gathered together in the blink of an eye and fled toward the same direction. "This isn't over, brat. Next time we meet, I'll be sure to extract your soul and torture it for all of eternity." Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang's menacing voice rumbled in the distance, and he disappeared into the distance after just a few flashes. After making the decision to retreat, he had done so in a very decisive manner and didn't stall in the slightest. He seemed to be very confident that Hanli wouldn't try to hunt him down, and sure enough, Hanli merely looked on expressionlessly as his opponent departed, displaying no intention of setting off in pursuit. In the distance, the spirit body made a hand seal before abruptly vanishing on the spot. Spatial fluctuations then erupted beside Hanli, and the spirit body re-emerged. Hanli harumphed coldly as he withdrew his provenance golden body amid a flash of golden light. His body then shrank down as his golden fur receded, and he reverted back to his human form. As opposed to being elated by this victory, Hanli continued to look into the distance with a grim expression. Just his clones alone are already this troublesome to deal with. His true body will only be even more powerful. Grand Ascension stage beings truly are as formidable as they're proclaimed to be. Hanli murmured to himself before withdrawing his gaze and waving a hand toward the spirit body beside him. The spirit body instantly flew toward him as a green shadow before vanishing into his body in a flash, and the 13 purple-striped gold-devouring beetles also flew back to his side. Hanli swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light that stowed away the beetles, then closed his eyes before making a hand seal while chanting an incantation. A thumb-sized crimson rune surfaced on his glabella, and it was flashing with gentle light. Moments later, Hanli opened his eyes, and a hint of elation appeared on his face. It worked. The purple word cauldron hasn't traveled all that far away. As soon as his voice trailed off, he switched to a series of complex hand seals, and the crimson rune on his glabella also began to fluctuate in brightness. Not long after that, a streak of black light appeared in the distance, and within it was none other than the purple word cauldron that had flown away during the battle. However, the cauldron stopped several thousand feet away from Hanli, and purple light flashed erratically from its surface as it emitted a faint buzzing sound, seemingly expressing hesitation to approach Hanli. However, after Hanli had activated that crimson rune, a connection had formed between them, and that made the cauldron unwilling to leave. The smile on Hanli's face widened at the sight of the cauldron, and the crimson rune flew directly out of his glabella before revolving around him. At the same time he began to chant something while flicking his fingers through the air, and a series of vibrant colorful incantation seals shot forth before vanishing into the cauldron in a flash. The small cauldron tremored before letting loose a clear cry akin to a dragon's roar, and it flew directly toward the crimson rune, which also vanished into the cauldron amid a flash of crimson light. A layer of crimson light then appeared over the surface of the cauldron, and it emitted a cry of elation. Only then did Hanli wave a hand toward the small cauldron with a smile on his face. On this occasion, the small purple cauldron was extremely obedient and voluntarily flew over to Hanli, shrinking down to several inches in size before landing on his palm. As long as he didn't leave Deep Heaven City thereafter, he wouldn't have anything to fear. However, prior to that, he had to visit the place where earthly hellish flames could be found. He had sworn a vow to Che Qigong, and he certainly didn't want to suffer backlash from inner demons. On top of that, the chaotic yin-yang qi really was very alluring to him as well. Sacred ancestor Shui Guang's clones had just retreated, so there was no way that they would return in a short time. As such, this was the perfect opportunity for him to fulfill the promise that he had made. However, that Che Qigong was a sacred ancestor as well, so he naturally wasn't going to believe everything that he said. He had to set up some defensive measures before he carried out the tasks that he had promised to complete. As for Heavenly City, all of the body integration cultivators had already fled, so there was no way that the city could have survived. As such, there was no point in returning to it. With that in mind, Hanli immediately made a decision and flew away as a streak of azure light. Meanwhile, the devilish giant was already tens of thousands of kilometers away, and he had reverted back to his normal humanoid form. On top of that, he had released his crimson canoe again, and the 3 clones were traveling toward Heavenly City atop the flying treasure. Along the way, all 3 clones remained completely silent. Several days later, the 3 clones caught sight of the collapsed city wall of Heavenly City. The air above the entire city had been enshrouded by inky black devilish qi, and when the crimson canoe approached the city, a group of armored warriors riding devilish steeds instantly emerged to greet the 3 clones in a respectful manner. Once the all-encompassing devilish cavalier drew a little closer, sacred ancestor Shui Guang instructed in a cold voice, "Activate the teleportation formation closest to our sacred army right away." "Yes, sacred ancestor." All of the mid-grade and high-grade devilish beings present were already aware of sacred ancestor Shui Guang's arrival, so this all-encompassing devilish cavalier naturally recognized the three clones, and he immediately gave an affirmative reply with a respectful bow. Half a month later, Han Li was flying through the air as a streak of barely visible azure light. His magic power fluctuations were also extremely subdued, and no one would be able to detect the streak of azure light unless they were an extremely powerful being or possessed a spirit eye ability. Han Li was currently flying over a small human city, one that had been abandoned over 100 years ago in anticipation for the devilish tribulation. The city was currently nothing more than a conglomeration of ruins and overgrown weeds, but as Han Li was flying over it, he casually swept his spiritual sense through the abandoned city, upon which a hint of surprise appeared on his face. He abruptly drew to a halt and looked down at the abandoned city with blue light flashing through his eyes. His brows suddenly furrowed slightly, and he flew down toward a certain direction as a streak of azure light. After just a few flashes, he appeared in the air above an ordinary-looking building. There were currently 5 cultivators in different attire surrounding the building and discussing something in hushed tones, and Han Li's sudden arrival naturally gave all of them a massive fright. They reflexively summoned treasures or made hand seals as they prepared to defend themselves, but Han Li didn't even bother to take a glance at them. "Piss off. What did you say? How dare?" Our sincerest apologies, we'll be taking our leave right away." These 5 cultivators were all at the deity transformation, and they were initially enraged by Han Li's words, but when he released his enormous body integration stage aura, all 5 of them were completely petrified and immediately backtracked before fleeing the scene. During their escape, they didn't even dare to turn around to look behind them, as if they were being pursued by a malicious ghost. Han Li cast a cold glance toward these people and hesitated momentarily, but decided not to do anything in the end. Right at this moment, an elated female voice rang out from the first floor of the building that had been surrounded. "Senior Han. I didn't expect to see you here. I'll come out to meet you right away." As soon as the voice trailed off, the front door was opened, and 3 women emerged from within the building. The first woman was tall and slender with fair snowy white skin. It was none other than Su Qinyu. "Long time no see, fellow Taoist Su," Han Li greeted with a smile. The last time they had met was when Han Li had visited the Su family, so it was quite a surprise for him to meet her again here. "Thank you for stepping in, senior. Otherwise we would have been in deep trouble." Su Qinyu hurriedly extended a respectful curtsy toward Han Li with an elated look on her face, and the 2 women accompanying her immediately followed suit. Han Li merely waved a hand and replied in a nonchalant manner, "No need to thank me, I just so happened to be passing by." "Who were those people? Are they enemies for your Su family?" "They're just a group of scoundrels who tried to take advantage of us. You should have torn them from limb to limb, senior." A woman with an oval face behind Su Qinyu said with an enraged pout. "Shush, Xiaoqing. We're already immensely fortunate to have encountered Senior Han here. How could you be so rude?" "Please forgive her, Senior Han. Xiaoqing is a niece of mine, and she's always been cultivating in our Su family, so she's a little spoiled." Su Qinyu scolded with a stern expression before turning to Han Li with an apologetic look in her eyes. Please forgive me, senior, I meant no offense." The woman by the name of Xiaoqing had also realized that her words had been rather inappropriate. "That's all right, I'm not one to be bothered by minor things like this. If I had known that those people were such scummy individuals, perhaps I would have put an end to them," Han Li replied with a nonchalant smile. Su Qinyu heaved an internal sigh of relief before making an inviting hand gesture. "Thank you for your understanding, senior. Please come in and take a seat." Han Li nodded in response before making his way into the room. The devilish army was situated very far away, and he hadn't spotted any devilish beings nearby, so he wasn't concerned about any potential hazards arising. The interior of the room wasn't very large, but all of the furniture and decor gave off a unique antiquated feel, seemingly indicating that they had been around for quite a long time. However, what drew Han Li's attention the most was the barely detectable restriction fluctuations near the room. As soon as they strode into the room, those restrictions instantly vanished, and even with his spiritual sense, he was unable to detect their source. This made him rather curious. Han Li sat down on the main seat in the room, then turned toward the 3 women who were standing respectfully beside him. "This doesn't seem to be a place inhabited by mortals. Is it somehow connected to your Su family?" "Indeed, Senior Han. This is a temporary lodging place that our Su family abandoned many years ago. We were chased here by that group of cultivators and forced to make use of the restriction here to protect ourselves," Su Qinyu replied in a respectful manner. Han Li nodded in response before asking, I see. This place is quite far away from your Su family, and I've heard your entire family has already moved to the holy city. Why are the three of you here? The three women exchanged a hesitant glance upon hearing this question, and in the end, a wry smile appeared on Su Qinyu's face as she replied, Our Su family did indeed move to the holy sovereign city, but Mistress Blood Spirit had some important matters to attend to recently, so she left the city and took some members of our family with her. After we had taken care of those matters and were heading back to the city, we encountered a devilish army along the way, and after a fierce battle, we were defeated and forced to flee for our lives. My nieces and I were pursued by a group of devilish beings, and we had only just shaken them off when we encountered that group of cultivators. Fellow Taoist Blood Spirit left the holy city? Han Li was rather surprised to hear this. Indeed. Initially, the elders of our family were opposed to her departure, but she insisted on leaving so they could only let her go, Su Qinyu replied. Instead of prying into exactly what important matters they had attended to, Han Li asked, Are you aware of fellow Taoist Blood Spirit's current situation? Rest assured, Senior Han, prior to our departure, we witnessed Mistress Blood Spirit make her escape. She was pursued by several high-grade devilish beings, but with her powers, self-preservation definitely wouldn't be an issue, Su Qinyu assured. I see, that's good to hear. By the way, what's the situation in the Holy Sovereign City currently like? The communication between the major cities has been completely cut off by the devilish army, and even communication talismans are no longer effective, Han Li inquired. The situation is not very good. Our Holy Sovereign City is fine as the devilish army over there hasn't even attempted an attack on the city. However, they've targeted the human settlements around the city instead, and many of the nearby sects and major families have been wiped out. On top of that, this devilish tribulation seems to be different from all of the previous ones. The devilish army is beginning to attack mortal cities to enslave mortal humans on a wide scale, Su Qinyu replied as a concerned look appeared on her face. Han Li's expression also darkened upon hearing this, and he sighed in a grim voice, So the rumors are true. The devilish beings are planning to permanently settle in the spirit realm. Before Su Qinyu had a chance to reply, the other voluptuous woman standing beside her exclaimed, What? Are you saying that the elder devil race is planning to conquer our human territory? Not just our human race. The demon race and even the nearby foreign races are all most likely targets that the elder devil race is planning to invade. I don't know much about the specific details, but these are the rumors that are circulating among the higher-level cultivators. In any case, there's no need for you to be overly concerned. Even if the sky falls down, there will be people in higher-up places to support it. I'm sure the Holy Island has already devised appropriate countermeasures, Han Li reassured with a faint smile. That's true. With the Holy Island and Master Mo Jianli to oppose them, I'm sure the Elder Devil race won't be able to succeed, Su Qinyu said in a relieved manner. The other two women were also very relieved to hear this. It was quite clear that the resounding reputations of the Holy Island and Mo Jianli had instilled them with a lot of confidence. After that, Han Li inquired about some details surrounding the devilish army near the Holy Sovereign City, and before he knew it, close to an hour had passed. Finally, Han Li stood up and prepared to leave. I still have some important matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave now. I hope to see you again someday. By the way, this is not a safe place to stay. I recommend you return to the Holy Sovereign City as soon as possible. The three women naturally didn't dare to stop him, and they accompanied him out of the room. Azure light flashed from Han Li's body, and he quickly flew away into the distance while Su Qinyu looked on with a complex expression. As soon as Han Li vanished into the distance, the woman with the oval face asked in an eager voice, Aunt Su, is that Senior Han the same senior who returned Mistress Blood Spirit to us? Is he really a body integration cultivator? An intrigued look also appeared in the other woman's eyes. Indeed. Back when he visited our Su family, he was already at the early body integration stage, and I heard that he made another breakthrough to the mid-body integration stage not long before the devilish tribulation, Su Qinyu replied with a wry smile. What? He's a mid-body integration stage cultivator? That's the first time I've seen someone with such a high cultivation base. I heard that you share quite a close bond and even worked with him in Deep Heaven City for some time. Is that true, Aunt Su? The woman with the oval face asked in an excited manner. What's the point in mentioning the past? My cultivation base has improved somewhat since that time, but it's nothing compared to the strides that Senior Han has made. He progressed from the deity transformation stage to the mid-body integration stage in less than 2,000 years, That's virtually completely unheard of in human history, Su Qinyu replied with a dejected shake of her head. After a brief silence, the other woman asked, "If that Senior Han really is that powerful, why didn't you try to keep him? With his assistance, we'll definitely be able to complete our task without a hitch. We've been separated from Mistress Blood Spirit, but she specifically told us that the tasks we've been assigned are the key to deciding whether Matriarch Ai Sol will be able to return to our Su family. There aren't even that many people in our Su family who are aware of what we're doing. Senior Han is a benefactor to our Su family, but it would still be best not to disclose something like this to him. In any case, he's already chased those cultivators away, so this place should be safe for now. If we work as quickly as we can, we should be able to secure that item soon, then reunite with Mistress Blood Spirit. At this stage it would be best not to get other people involved," Su Qinyu replied in a calm manner. The other two women shared a glance upon hearing this before nodding in unison. After a brief pause, Su Qinyu strode into the room again and said, "All right, let's go down again." The other two women naturally followed closely behind her. Meanwhile, in an underground cave countless kilometers away, a crimson-armored beauty was pulling an ice blade that was flashing with crimson light out of a high-grade devilish being's body. The devilish being's lifeless body thumped heavily down onto the ground, and there were two more inky black devilish bodies lying completely still in the cave. Furthermore, all three bodies were covered in a layer of ice and frost. The woman glanced at the bodies expressionlessly before flying deeper into the cave along a narrow passageway. After making a few turns, then descending deeper underground, she appeared in front of an ordinary-looking stone wall. Her eyes immediately lit up, and she flipped a hand over to produce a ball of azure light, within which was contained a miniature azure cauldron. The cauldron rotated on the spot and instantly swelled to around 10 feet tall. It was shimmering with azure light, and had projections of flora and fauna surfacing around it. This was none other than the Heaven Void Cauldron that Han Li once possessed. This crimson-armored woman was naturally none other than the blood spirit clone of Fairy Ai Sol, and after being separated from the rest of the Su family entourage by the devilish army, she had flown all the way here before making short work of these three high-grade devilish beings. It was quite clear that she had led her pursuers into this underground cave for a specific purpose, rather than just as a panicked snap decision. After summoning the Heaven Void Cauldron, Blood Spirit began to chant something while flicking her fingers toward the cauldron in quick succession. Several azure incantation seals shot forth before vanishing into the cauldron one after another, and a loud buzzing sound instantly rang out from the treasure. The lid of the cauldron tremored slightly before flying up into the air and vanishing into space, following which several azure runes emerged from the cauldron amid a flash of azure light. These runes quickly swelled in size before lining up next to one another, then flew directly toward the stone wall up ahead. A dull rumbling boom rang out, and as soon as the azure runes came into contact with the stone wall, the latter crumbled away into dust to reveal an ancient copper gate, which had several shimmering silver restriction talismans plastered to its surface. The cold look in Blood Spirit's eyes eased slightly upon seeing this, and she murmured to herself in an elated manner, "Thank heavens it's still intact. It seems that no one has discovered this place. My true body really made a wise decision by setting up this backup measure." She then flicked a finger again, and a gust of fierce wind struck the cauldron from the side. The cauldron immediately let loose a clear ringing sound before expelling a burst of azure light that swept toward the copper gate. In the face of the azure light, the silver runes on the gate were silently stripped away, and the gate slowly opened on its own. Blood Spirit immediately flew in through the gate as a streak of crimson light, and in the instant she passed by the azure cauldron, it abruptly vanished amid a flash of azure light. Beyond the gate was a slightly dim hall that was around several acres in area. The entire hall was empty aside from a square stone table, upon which sat another small cauldron. This cauldron was also shimmering with azure light and had intricate patterns all over its surface. It bore a strong resemblance to the Heaven Void Cauldron. The crimson light receded, and Blood Spirit appeared in front of the stone table before making a grabbing motion toward the small cauldron, which rose up into the air and flew into her grasp as a ball of azure light. A hint of elation appeared on Blood Spirit's face as she appraised the small cauldron. Heaven Void Cauldron, Void Spirit Cauldron, and Void Emperor Cauldron. I bet those bastards aren't aware that I just so happened to replicate another cauldron treasure before I set off back then. This Void Emperor Cauldron is far more powerful than even the other two cauldrons. Now that I've secured it, I have the key to access that place again. Once the devilish tribulation concludes, I'll be able to set off for the Thunder Continent." Blood Spirit murmured to herself, and the small azure cauldron in her hand vanished amid a flash of spiritual light. After that, she didn't remain in the hall any longer. She rubbed her hands together before raising them up into the air, and a loud thunderclap rang out as countless bolts of crimson lightning erupted out of her palms in a frenzy to strike walls of the hall around her. The entire hall was inundated by crimson lightning in the blink of an eye, and all of its walls were shattered. Seconds after Blood Spirit shot forth out of the hall as a streak of crimson light, the entire hall completely crumbled. Not long after that, the crimson streak of light appeared in the air above an extremely bleak and barren plain, then set off toward a certain direction. In that direction lay the small city where Su Qianyu's trio was situated. A month later, Han Li hovered high up in the air and appraised the battle down below with a frosty expression. Over 10,000 feet below him, there were over 100 purple-armored devilish beings with peculiar devilish patterns on their faces, and they launched ferocious attacks toward a group of a dozen or so human cultivators. Even the devilish beings with the lowest cultivation base among them were at the nascent soul stage, and they were led by a pair of mid-deity transformation stage devilish beings. This was an elite devilish force. As for the human cultivators who were being attacked, they all wore similar attire, but there was great diversity in their age and cultivation bases. There were a few little girls among them who were only at the foundation establishment stage, while the most powerful being among their ranks was a late deity transformation stage elderly man. This was clearly a sect or a cultivation family. The majority of these human cultivators were at the core formation stage, so even though the elderly man was doing everything in his power to set up everyone in a profound formation, they were still in an extremely perilous situation. The elderly man was controlling a large seal treasure, but his eyes were filled with despair as he appraised the current situation. In the face of so many devilish elites, even if he could escape with his life, all of these juniors of his would undoubtedly be killed. With that in mind, a hint of ferocity appeared in the elderly man's eyes, and he expelled a large mouthful of blood essence toward the seal before pointing a finger at it. The sound of howling wind and rumbling thunder instantly rang out from the seal, and a white WRM emerged from it before pouncing directly toward the two mid-deity transformation stage devilish beings. The two high-grade devilish beings knew that the elderly man was making a final stand, and they cackled in a sinister manner as a giant devilish bird projection appeared behind each of their backs. The projections depicted a pair of devilish creatures with deer heads and bat bodies, presenting quite a harrowing sight to behold. As soon as the two projections emerged, they immediately flapped their wings and shot forth to clash with the white WRM projection. The two sides seemed to be evenly matched, and right at this moment, the formation formed by the human cultivators was finally beginning to crumble in the face of the devilish beings' torrential barrage of attacks. All of the human cultivators' faces turned deathly pale upon seeing this, and the elderly man let loose a loud cry as he laid a hand onto his own head, preparing to release his nascent soul to truly make a final stand. Right at this moment, a cold harumph rang out in the air above. The voice wasn't very loud, but it struck the listener with a bone-chilling sensation. All of the human and devilish beings down below felt as if thunderclaps had erupted right within their minds, and they swayed unsteadily in response. Immediately thereafter, a ball of azure light emerged, within which a humanoid figure could be seen. The humanoid figure swept a sleeve downward, and over 100 streaks of azure light shot forth before transforming into several hundred streaks of sword chi. The sword chi revolved through the air before hurtling downward, but in the next instant, all of them vanished into thin air as if they were nothing more than projections. Spatial fluctuations then erupted in the air above the devilish beings, and a series of azure flying swords shot forth out of space before whizzing through the air. A string of anguished howls rang out as all of the devilish beings were completely inundated by azure light, and their bodies were sliced into countless pieces. Even their nascent souls had been shredded into nothingness. A vast expanse of blood mist permeated throughout the entire area alongside the overwhelming odor of blood and gore. After the blood mist dispersed, all of the devilish beings had been slain, and the human cultivators began to look around with shock and bewilderment in their eyes. The late deity transformation stage elderly man was the first to return to his senses, and he hurriedly extended a respectful bow toward the azure figure up above. Which senior has stepped in to assist us? I am Jian Feiqian of the Pegasus sect. Thank you for your kindness. The other cultivators also quickly returned to their senses and extended deep bows toward Han Li as well. We're all humans, so I naturally couldn't just stand by idly and watch. Head toward the west. There are no devilish beings there, so it's safe for now. That's all the assistance I'll be able to give you, Han Li said as he swept a sleeve through the air, and all of the streaks of azure sword chi flew back up his sleeve. The elderly man was trying his best to see the appearance of the humanoid figure within the azure light, but to no avail. Thus, he immediately extended another respectful bow and said, "May I ask your esteemed name, Senior? Our Pegasus sect will be sure to pledge our allegiance to you as thanks for your kindness." My surname is Han. There's no need for you to go out of your way to repay me, I just so happened to be passing by. Alright, I have to go now, best of luck to all of you. Hanli chuckled and flew away as a streak of azure light before the elderly man could say anything further. After just a few flashes he vanished into the distance, traveling at an incredible speed. The elderly man was quite startled by Han Li's speed, and he was rooted to the spot for a long while before gradually returning to his senses. "Master, do you know which senior that was?" a nascent soul stage male cultivator asked in a cautious manner. There's no way that a spatial tempering cultivator would be able to kill so many high-grade devilish beings at once. Even the average body integration cultivator would struggle to do what he just did. According to my knowledge, there are only 2 body integration stage seniors with the Han surname in our human race. One of them is Senior Han Qin, who recently pledged his allegiance to the Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign, while the other is Senior Han Li of Deep Heaven City. As for exactly which one it is, we'll have to verify that once we get to a safer place. He saved our lives, and that is something that we cannot simply forget, the elderly man replied. Yes, master. Seeing as devilish beings have appeared here, this place is no longer safe. According to our original plan, we were going to travel to the sect hidden within the Blackwater Mountain Range, but that Senior Han is telling us to go west. From what I know, the west is comprised of a vast expanse of bleak and barren plains where there won't be many places for us to hide, the middle-aged man said in a cautious voice. The Blackwater Mountain Range isn't too far away from this place, so it's most likely no longer a safe place either. As such, we should place our trust in Senior Han. So what if the west is filled with flat plains? Do you think we'll be able to escape the spiritual sense detection of the high-grade devilish beings if we hide in a mountain range? If we can find a secluded place, then burrow deep underground and set up a formation, there's a chance that we'll be able to survive this devilish tribulation. After all, the elder devil race can't scour the entirety of our human territory, the elderly man said with a cold smile. The middle-aged man thought about this for a moment before nodding in response. We'll do as you say, master. Oh, by the way, collect the storage treasures from these devilish beings. These are all devilish elites, so I'm sure they'll be carrying some valuable things. That Senior Han didn't bother to take them, but they could be of great assistance to our Pegasus sect, the elderly man instructed. The middle-aged man naturally gave an affirmative response before relaying the elderly man's instructions to everyone else. Thus, not long after that, the group of human cultivators flew toward the west as Hanli had suggested. As for the devilish beings that had been slain, they most likely wouldn't be discovered by the elder devil race for quite a while. Along his journey, Hanli had encountered similar scenarios several times, and upon verifying that there weren't any devilish lords present, he had slain all of the devilish beings that he had encountered without any hesitation. Unless he were to encounter a devilish army with several devilish lords among their ranks, he really didn't have much to fear. Half a month later, a primitive forest appeared up ahead. The trees here were extremely tall and lush, and the dense canopy up above cast eerie shadows over the dense undergrowth. Hanli stopped at the edge of the forest, then peered deep into it. In the extremely far distance, there was a small mountain range comprised of 7 mountains of different sizes. Hanli withdrew his gaze before flying directly toward the mountain range again as a streak of azure light. He was traveling toward the second tallest of the 7 mountains, and after just a few flashes he reached its summit. However, as he inspected his surroundings, a hint of surprise immediately appeared on his face. There were 2 human cultivators on the same mountain summit, one of whom was a rotund monk in a purple kasaya who was sitting in front of what appeared to be a volcanic crater. As for his companion, this was an extremely thin and hideous elderly man with dark skin that resembled tree bark. Both of them were also at the mid-body integration stage, and they had used some type of aura concealment method that had led to Hanli failing to detect their presence in advance. The 2 immediately turned toward Hanli in unison, and the rotund monk faltered initially before a hint of recognition flashed through his eyes. Ah, greetings, fellow Taoist Han. This was none other than Buddhist Master Tian Shan, who was one of the Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign subordinates, and had met Hanli once in the past. Greetings to you too, Buddhist Master Tian Shan. Hanli was quite surprised, but his expression remained unchanged as he clasped his fist in a salute from afar. The hideous elderly man had also identified Han Li's mid-body integration stage cultivation base, and his expression changed slightly as he asked in a coarse and raspy voice, "Do you recognize him, Tian-chan?" "Hehe, it's no wonder that you don't recognize fellow Taoist Han. He only reached the body integration stage several centuries ago. You've constantly been in seclusion during this time, so there's naturally no way you two could have met," the Buddhist master replied with a smile. "Several centuries? If I'm not mistaken, fellow Taoist Han is already at the mid-body integration stage, is he not?" The elderly man asked as a hint of astonishment flashed through his eyes. "I've only just reached the mid-body integration stage not long ago. May I ask your name, fellow Taoist?" Han Li asked as he returned the elderly man's salute. "I am Yu Xiaotian, people call me Master Black Rain. Diske, it's extremely remarkable that you were able to make a body integration stage breakthrough in just several centuries. Even on the Holy Island, I haven't met anyone with aptitude that can match yours," the elderly man said with undisguised astonishment in his voice. "Holy Island? Are you a Holy Island envoy, brother you?" Han Li was quite startled to hear this. "I wouldn't dare to proclaim myself to be a Holy Island envoy, but I do indeed currently reside on the Holy Island," the elderly man replied in a modest manner. "I've heard much about the Holy Island. It's a pity that I've never had a chance to visit it. Please do tell me about it when you get some spare time, brother you," Han Li said with a smile as the shock on his face faded. "Hehe, under normal circumstances, the Holy Island extends invitations to body integration stage cultivators once every 1,000 years, and some are even able to remain on the island to cultivate. If it weren't for this devilish tribulation, perhaps you would have already been invited to the island, brother Han," Master Black Rain chuckled. "I see. This is the first time I've heard of this. Please forgive me for my lack of knowledge on this matter," Han Li replied with a nod. "Not at all. The Holy Island has always been a very secretive place, so it's no surprise that you haven't heard much about it," Master Black Rain chuckled. "Benefactor Han, I heard that you moved to Deep Heaven City following the commencement of the devilish tribulation. What's the situation like in Deep Heaven City now?" Buddhist Master Tian-chan asked. "I am indeed currently residing in Deep Heaven City, and I'm technically a guest elder in the city. Unfortunately, Deep Heaven City is currently in quite a precarious situation. All of the large human settlements around the city have been conquered," Han Li replied with a grim expression. "Is the situation that bad already? I've heard that the large settlements around Deep Heaven City all have body integration cultivators among their ranks. How were they conquered so quickly?" Buddhist Master Tian-chan asked in a stunned manner. "That's quite a long story that I'll tell you about later. For now, would you be able to disclose to me why you and brother you have come here?" Han Li asked with a curious look in his eyes. "Well?" Buddhist Master Tian-chan turned to Master Black Rain with a rather hesitant expression. Master Black Rain pondered the situation for a moment before making a decision. "Brother Han is one of the most powerful beings in our human race, so he'll be a great ally for us. I think the two of us may not have that great a chance of completing our objective, but if fellow Taoist Han were to assist us, then we'll have a much greater chance." Han Li was even more intrigued upon hearing this, but he merely waited in silence. Sure enough, after receiving Master Black Rain's approval, Buddhist Master Tian-chan nodded with a smile, and said, "I was thinking the same thing. In that case, allow me to explain the situation to you, Benefactor Han. I hope you'll be willing to lend us your assistance." Han Li considered this for a moment before giving a conditional reply. "I'll be sure to do so if it benefits the state of our human race. We were actually instructed by the Holy Island to come here for the earthly hellish flames," Buddhist Master Tian-chan revealed. Han Li had already anticipated this to be the case, but his heart still sank slightly upon hearing this. However, what Master Black Rain said next immediately put his heart at ease. He could see the peculiar look that had appeared in Han Li's eyes, and he immediately added, "To put it more accurately, we're here for a certain spirit item within the earthly hellish flames." "There are spirit items within the earthly hellish flames? I've never heard of something like that before," Han Li said in a rather surprised manner. "Indeed there is, and this spirit item takes 50,000 years to come into fruition. Have you heard of an item known as the Pipe Dream Stone, Benefactor Han?" Buddhist Master Tian-chan asked. "Pipe Dream Stone? Is that the top-grade material used to set up large illusionary formations?" Han Li asked as his brows furrowed slightly. "Indeed. However, what we're searching for is not an ordinary Pipe Dream Stone. It's a Pipe Dream Stone spirit which has already attained intelligence. Not only can this type of stone spirit only emerge among Pipe Dream Stones, a rigorous set of conditions must be met before they can come into existence. As such, not many people are aware of its existence, and the stone spirit here was something a senior of our race unintentionally discovered tens of thousands of years ago. Unfortunately, that senior was unable to capture it, and it was startled into fleeing into the earthly hellish flames. Even Grand Ascension cultivators wouldn't dare to venture into the earthly hellish flames lightly, so there was no way that anyone could pursue the stone spirit. However, the mighty figures of the Holy Island have recently conducted divination and predicted that the day of the pipe dream stone spirit's tribulation will arrive soon, so there's no way it can continue to hide in the earthly hellish flames. As such, this will be the only chance we have to capture it, Buddhist Master Tian Shan explained. I see, so the pipe dream stone spirit has already been residing within the earthly hellish flames for tens of thousands of years. No wonder I've never heard of it. However, even if it is a stone spirit that has attained intelligence, it shouldn't be all that powerful. Wouldn't it be a simple task for you to capture it? Hanli asked. This pipe dream stone spirit is far different from normal stone spirits. Not only does it possess the abilities common to all stone spirits, it also possesses the ability to instantly conjure up powerful illusions that one could fall into without even realizing it. The senior of our human race who first discovered the stone spirit was quite a renowned figure at the time, but not only was he unable to capture the stone spirit, he was trapped in its illusions for half a year before finally managing to escape. On top of that, it was said that the ordeal had heavily taxed his body and caused him to fall severely ill after he escaped. The task that we've been assigned with is to capture the stone spirit alive, so even though Buddhist Master Tian Shan and I have made extensive preparations, our chances of success still aren't very high, Master Black Rain explained. I see. The innate abilities of spirit items such as stone spirits are generally all extremely powerful, so it's no wonder that the two of you are proceeding with such caution. By the way, would you happen to know the reason why the Holy Island sent you two to capture this stone spirit? Hanli asked. It seems that the demon core within this stone spirit is going to be quite an important asset against the Elder Devil race, and this task was delegated to us by Master Mo Jianli through the Holy Island. That's all the details that I'm aware of, Master Black Rain replied without any hesitation. The instruction came from Senior Mo? Hanli drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. Fellow Taoist Tian Shan and I are relatively powerful figures in our human race. If it weren't for the fact that Senior Mo was the one who delegated this duty to us, we wouldn't have come to this place, Master Black Rain said with a smile. In that case, it's only right that I do my part as well. Please tell me what you need me to do, Hanli said in a serious manner. Buddhist Master Tian Shan was ecstatic to hear this and he replied, I knew that you wouldn't turn us down, Brother Han. We don't actually need you to take on any complex tasks. All we need is for you to assist us as the situation requires. If the stone spirit manages to slip past us, we'll be counting on you to stop it so that it doesn't manage to flee back into the earthly hellish flames. Master Black Rain also expressed his gratitude toward Hanli. A thought then suddenly occurred to Buddhist Master Tian Shan, and he asked, by the way, why are you here when Deep Heaven City is in such a perilous situation, Brother Han? Do you have something you need to do here as well? Indeed. I need to use the earthly hellish flames to refine a few treasures of mine, but that naturally pales in significance next to the task that you two have been assigned, Hanli replied. Thank you for prioritizing our objective above your own, Brother Han. I'll have to ask you to refrain from approaching the earthly hellish flames for now. Otherwise, if the stone spirit detects the presence of outsiders, things could become rather troublesome, Buddhist Master Tian Shan said as an apologetic look appeared on his face. Thus, after exchanging some more pleasantries, Hanli joined the two of them and sat down beside the crater as well. He cast his gaze toward the bottom of the crater, and his brows furrowed slightly. The crater was several acres in area, but it was clearly divided into two completely different parts. The top half was comprised of ordinary gray stone, but the bottom half of the crater was as smooth as jade. On top of that, that section of the crater was of a sinister dark green color, and at the very bottom was a cloud of yellow mist that was surging incessantly. The occasional burst of rumbling could be heard coming from within the yellow mist, and it was flashing erratically with faint light, as if it were concealing some type of living creature. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly, and he abruptly flipped a hand over to produce a white formation plate. He flicked his wrist, and the formation plate was instantly hurled toward the bottom of the crater as a streak of white light. As the formation plate passed through the top half of the crater, nothing happened to it, but once it entered the bottom half, layers of ice suddenly began to appear over its surface. It was quickly completely sealed in ice, then thudded heavily into the mist before shattering amid a crisp crack. The yin qi here really is as powerful as the rumors proclaim. Han Li murmured to himself, but his expression remained unchanged. It's said that the earthly hellish flames here arise directly from the depths of hell. Even though it's in the form of flames, it contains extraordinary glacial power. Unfortunately, this glacial power is completely different from normal glacial power and can't be refined by a living being. We humans can only use it to refine some special treasures, and that's quite a pity, Buddhist Master Tian Shan chuckled in a wistful manner. The powers of yin, yang, and the 5 elements stem directly from chaos. They're the foundation powers of the laws of heaven and earth. The earthly hellish flames here are imbued with extremely astonishing glacial powers, so it only makes sense that its uses are very limited. Otherwise, if a person using a glacial cultivation art could absorb the yin qi here as they pleased, their cultivation base would progress at an unprecedentedly rapid rate. There's no way that such an outrageous cultivation shortcut could exist, Master Black Rain interjected in an indifferent manner. Indeed. However, I've heard that these earthly hellish flames could be one of the entrances that lead directly into the infernal realm. If that's the case, then these flames really are very intriguing, Han Li said with a smile. That's a rumor that's been circulating since ancient times, but these earthly hellish flames are incredibly lethal. Body integration cultivators like us can only delve around 10,000 feet into it at most, and even Grand Ascension cultivators will be at risk of losing their lives once they reach any deeper than 100,000 feet. Hence, no one can verify that legend, Buddhist Master Tian Shan mused in a contemplative manner. There's no need to entertain such a thought for too long. If these flames really do lead to the infernal realm, then what awaits us on the other side will only be a hellish landscape rife with malicious ghosts and vengeful spirits. The ultimate pursuit of cultivators like us is naturally to ascend to the true immortal realm, where we can truly attain eternal life, Master Black Rain chuckled. Buddhist Master Tian Shan shook his head with a serious expression in response. I beg to differ. Those of us who follow in Buddhist teachings believe in karma and causality. In order to pursue immortality, one must first. Thus, the two began to share their viewpoints on the matter, and an impromptu debate suddenly commenced, one that Han Li found to be rather amusing. Time passed by slowly, and around an hour later, the pressure in the air had mounted to such an extent that the layer of ice that had just taken shape on the mountain was beginning to crack and groan. A resounding boom rang out from the vortex in the sky, and a bolt of lightning that was as thick as a water tank came crashing down out of its center. The bolt of lightning struck the other vortex within the giant crater in a flash, leaving a scorching trail in its wake. The bolt of silver lightning vanished in a flash, and the mist around the vortex churned violently, following which a low roar of agony rang out from within. Immediately thereafter, a thunderous roar erupted from beneath the ground alongside a burst of astonishing energy fluctuations. The entire mountain began to quake, and countless cracks appeared on the surface of the layer of ice as it began to shatter. Right at this moment, silver light flickered within the black vortex up above, and another thick pillar of silver lightning took shape before crashing down with devastating might. Right as this bolt of lightning was about to strike the giant crater as well, an enraged roar rang out from down below, and a burst of yellow flames erupted from within the mist. The silver lightning and yellow flames intertwined, and the flames seemed to be burning ferociously, but they were giving off an astonishing bone-chilling sensation. At the same time, projections of ghostly faces were appearing around it, creating a very harrowing sight to behold. A dull thump rang out, and the silver lightning and yellow flames disappeared in unison. Are those earthly hellish flames? No, such a small amount of earthly hellish flames shouldn't be this powerful, Han Li murmured to himself as his eyes narrowed slightly. Meanwhile, Buddhist Master Tian Shan was clicking his tongue with wonder. As expected of a spirit item that's been cultivating in the earthly hellish flames for tens of thousands of years, the Pipe Dreamstone spirit has integrated the earthly hellish flames with its demonic chi to form an extremely powerful ability. You'll have to watch out for these demonic flames, Benefactor Han. Han Li's heart stirred upon hearing this, and he replied, Thank you for the words of caution, fellow Taoist. I'll be sure to be on my guard. One bolt of lightning after another came crashing down from above, and the lightning strikes were increasing in frequency. However, the yellow demonic flames rising up from the bottom of the crater were able to keep up, and all of the bolts of lightning were kept at bay. However, the resistance posed by the yellow flames had clearly enraged a certain omnipotent being, and the lightning strikes suddenly ceased. In the next instant, a burst of rumbling rang out from within the vortex, and a series of head-sized balls of silver lightning emerged. The balls of lightning were crackling incessantly within the dark clouds, and there were too many of them to count. In the face of such a threatening phenomenon, the stone spirit down below was naturally unable to continue hiding in the yellow mist any longer. A strange cry rang out, and the yellow mist surged, following which an object that was around a foot in size shot forth from the bottom of the crater. After just a single flash, it had reached an altitude of over 1,000 feet, and it hovered in midair while staring up at the balls of lightning with wariness in its eyes. Hanli focused his gaze on the object to find that it had a remarkably large mouth for thin and long limbs, and a short and stubby neck that was virtually indistinguishable from the rest of its body. It bore a strong resemblance to a toad. However, there was a crimson eye at the center of its head, and its entire body was shimmering with golden light. On top of that, its four limbs were also tipped with sharp claws rather than flippers as one would expect of a toad. So that's the pipe dream stone spirit? It sure has a peculiar appearance. Hanli was very intrigued. In the instant that the stone spirit emerged, all of the balls of lightning came crashing down in unison as if they had been provoked. The entire mountain was instantly illuminated by scintillating silver light, and the balls of lightning were raining down from above like hailstones. In response, the pipe dream stone spirit immediately opened its mouth to expel a small yellow flower. The flower was shimmering with yellow light and was covered in 5 colored runes, and it swelled drastically to around 10 feet in size to shield the stone spirit's body. It was quite clear just from a single glance that this giant flower was no ordinary item. In the instant that the giant flower was summoned, a dozen or so balls of lightning crashed down onto it in rapid succession. The flower rotated slowly on the spot, and the 5 colored runes on its surface lit up, upon which all of the balls of lightning vanished silently into the flower like sandcastles in the rising tide. What was even more astonishing was that with each wave of lightning orbs that the flower devoured, its flower petals would noticeably expand, and after over 10 waves, the flower had swelled to around twice its original size. As a result, the rate at which the giant flower was absorbing balls of lightning also increased drastically, and not long after that, all of the balls of lightning had disappeared into the flower. The pipe dream stone spirit beneath the giant flower remained completely unscathed, and it let loose a clear cry of elation at the sight of the giant flower's current state. The stone spirit's belly deflated before it abruptly inhaled with all its might, and the giant flower was drawn back into its stomach as a ball of light. Lightning flashed from the stone spirit's body, and a dozen or so thick bolts of silver lightning erupted forth, then formed a silver lightning net around it. The stone spirit swelled drastically in size amid the lightning, and within the span of just a few breaths, it had expanded to the size of a cow-calf. At the same time, its aura had also become a lot more powerful, and its powers seemed to have been significantly enhanced. A thunderclap rang out from within the black vortex up above again, and countless silver snakes were dancing erratically within it. There were also a dozen or so silver lightning WIRMs that were visible from the outside, and seemed to be about to erupt out of the vortex at any moment. This is rather troublesome. This pipe dream stone spirit has the ability to convert heavenly lightning into power for itself. At this rate, it's only going to become more and more powerful, rather than be weakened by this lightning tribulation. In that case, now would be the best time to strike. Fellow Taoist Han Buddhist Master Tian Shan, let's do it. Master Black Rain suddenly transmitted his voice to his 2 companions, and his frustration was quite apparent. Han Li naturally didn't offer any objections and transmitted his voice in an affirmative reply. Buddhist Master Tian Shan also nodded with a grim look on his face. Right at this moment, the dozen or so lightning WRMs in the black clouds above finally came crashing down. Go! Master Black Rain immediately sprang into action upon seeing this. He quickly made a hand seal and immediately disappeared on the spot as a plume of black smoke. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted in the air over 10,000 feet above the mountain summit, and Master Black Rain re-emerged, then abruptly raised a hand with a fierce look on his face. A ball of silver light shot forth before transforming into a giant silver bell that was over 100 feet tall. The giant bell descended viciously toward the stone spirit, and at the same time, countless black threads erupted out of thin air around the small mountain before hurtling toward the stone spirit in unison. A white lotus flower also appeared behind the pipe dream stone spirit, and white light flashed from the flower, upon which a faint humanoid figure emerged. It was none other than Buddhist Master Tian Shan. Buddhist Master Tian Shan had his head lowered slightly, and his face was completely expressionless. A string of translucent Buddhist beads flew out of his sleeve, then transformed into several tens of five-colored balls of light that shot forth through the air. Even before these balls of light had struck the stone spirit, the sound of howling wind and rumbling thunder could be heard erupting from them. At the same time, they swelled drastically and reached the size of human heads in the blink of an eye. The pipe dream stone spirit was initially rather startled by this abrupt string of attacks, then let loose a sharp cry of fury. It opened its mouth to expel the giant yellow flower again, which positioned itself directly beneath the descending giant silver bell. Immediately thereafter, its body blurred slightly as it began to revolve on the spot. Golden light flashed, and countless streaks of golden light erupted from its body before hurtling through the surrounding air in all directions. Golden light and black threads intertwined as a string of piercing explosions rang out, and countless balls of light emerged around the stone spirit to illuminate the entire mountain. The black threads were unable to inch any closer to the stone spirit, nor were the five-colored balls of light and streaks of golden light. Meanwhile, the silver bell clashed with the giant flower, and the former shuddered as a string of crisp bell chimes rang out. Each chime was louder than the previous one, and the sound traveled deep into the listener's soul. A peculiar turn of events then unfolded. Following the passage of the third bell chime, the giant yellow flower suddenly shattered without any warning and vanished as countless specks of spiritual light. The silver bell then blurred before expanding by several-fold in size again, then crashed down onto the pipe dream stone spirit like a small mountain, sealing the stone spirit securely within it. Master Black Rain and Buddhist Master Tian Chan both faltered slightly upon seeing this before elated looks appeared on their faces, and they withdrew their hand seals. At this moment, the dozen or so silver lightning WRMS had already crashed down from above, but as soon as they approached the mountain summit, a giant silver net that encompassed the entire mountain emerged. All of the lightning WRMS that struck the net immediately exploded before being absorbed by the net as countless wisps of lightning. As expected of a renowned spirit treasure on the chaotic myriad spirit roll, the silver celestial lightning net that Master Black Rain had set up in advance was able to keep even heavenly lightning at bay. Master Black Rain began to chant something while flicking his fingers, and a dozen or so incantation seals vanished into the giant bell in a flash. The silver bell tolled, and the spiritual light on its surface flashed erratically as Master Black Rain prepared to stow it away. However, during this split-second delay, an earth-shattering boom suddenly erupted from within the silver bell, and it was blown up into the air by a burst of glacial fluctuations. Immediately thereafter, violent yellow flames emerged, and a ball of golden light shot forth like a shooting star before immediately fleeing toward the giant crater down below. The pipe dream stone spirit seemed to have realized how powerful its enemies were and was escaping from the battle. Master Black Rain and Buddhist Master Tian Chan naturally weren't going to allow the stone spirit to get away so easily. Master Black Rain immediately made a hand seal, and a burst of silver sound waves erupted from the giant silver bell before sweeping downward in a violent manner. Meanwhile, Buddhist Master Tian Chan flipped a hand over to produce a pristine white formation plate amid a flash of spiritual light. He pointed his finger rapidly at the formation plate a few times, and countless light formations suddenly emerged near the giant crater amid a rumbling boom. Bursts of restriction fluctuations immediately surged forth in a frenzy, instantly forming a huge net that barred the stone spirit from being able to make its retreat. On top of that, the cry of a phoenix rang out in the air above the restrictions, and 3 balls of crimson flames flashed as 3 fiery birds emerged. The 3 crimson birds then immediately opened their beaks and blasted forth 3 pillars of crimson flames up into the air. The flames instantly formed a fiery cloud that swept toward the stone spirit from one side. On the other side, that translucent flying scorpion had also appeared out of thin air. Its blue tail lashed out, a streak of poisonous blue light shot forth out of its stingers. Thus, the pipe dream stone spirit was plunged into a perilous situation again in the blink of an eye. The stone spirit seemed to have been completely enraged by this, and golden light revolved around its body as it abruptly let loose a sharp cry. The third crimson eye on its forehead then immediately widened, and a burst of scintillating white light appeared within it. The light was so bright and piercing that even Master Black Rain and Buddhist Master Tian Chan were forced to close their eyes, and when they reopened their eyes, their expressions changed drastically. They discovered that they were situated within a world of yellow flames. The flames appeared to be scorching hot, but gave off a bone-chilling sensation instead. Earthly hellish flames. No, this is an illusionary technique. Master Black Rain immediately identified this to be an illusion, but his expression didn't ease in the slightest. Prior to setting off, He had heard that Pipe Dream Stone Spirit's innate illusionary techniques were extremely profound and could trap even body integration stage beings. However, never did he think that it would be capable of unleashing such a powerful illusionary technique without any warning. On top of that, the illusion that was being manifested was of these extremely troublesome earthly hellish flames. This stone spirit had been residing in the earthly hellish flames for countless years, and it had honed its illusionary techniques to an extraordinary level. It definitely wouldn't be an easy task to break out of this illusion. Time was of the essence here, so they had no choice but to break out through the use of brute force. With that in mind, Master Black Rain immediately released several small black shields to protect himself. Meanwhile, the Buddhist Master Tian Chan opened his eyes to find himself situated in a murky gray space. Master Black Rain and the other spirit beasts were nowhere to be seen. There was only a gigantic creature that was over 10,000 feet tall hovering several thousand feet away from him. This was a shimmering golden creature that resembled a colossal toad, but it had a row of 7 golden eyes that stretched from its head all the way down its back. The 7 eyes were all appraising Buddhist Master Tian Chan in a completely expressionless manner, and the formidable aura that the gargantuan creature was giving off struck one with a sense of asphyxiation. 7-eyed gold toad. Buddhist Master Tian Chan's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. However, he then uttered a Buddhist prayer, and a determined look reappeared on his face. He made a grabbing motion with both hands, and spiritual light flashed as a golden Buddhist staff and a silver bowl emerged at the same time. Not only were Master Black Rain and Buddhist Master Tian Chan standing completely still in mid-air, the 3 fiery birds had also ceased expelling the crimson pillars of flames. They were currently flapping their wings violently on the spot with panicked looks on their faces, clearly having been trapped into illusions of their own. Only the translucent flying scorpion was somehow able to remain completely unaffected by the stone spirit's illusionary technique, and it was still releasing a streak of blue light out of its stinger. However, it was no match for the Pipe Dream Stone Spirit on its own, and the stone spirit expelled a burst of demonic flames to ward off these streaks of blue light with ease. It then aimed a vicious glare at the scorpion before crashing down toward the restrictions down below as a ball of golden light. The stone spirit seemed to be quite intelligent and knew that its top priority was to escape into the giant crater, rather than waste time battling its assailants. As it was flying down from above, it abruptly opened its mouth to release a series of head-sized balls of yellow light. The balls of yellow light struck a certain part of the restrictions in a flash, and a string of loud booms rang out. The balls of yellow light exploded in rapid succession, and the restriction began to waver and display signs of collapsing. The stone spirit was elated to see this, and it opened its mouth to expel another string of balls of light to land the final blow on the restrictions. However, right at this moment, a humanoid figure suddenly emerged in the air above the restrictions, and an azure-robed young man appeared amid a flash of azure light. The young man looked up at the Pipe Dream Stone Spirit with a faint smile, then swept a sleeve through the air to release a silver ruler. The ruler blurred before conjuring up countless ruler projections, which swept through all of the descending balls of light. This young man was naturally none other than Han Li. The Pipe Dream Stone Spirit had focused its illusionary technique primarily on Master Black Rain and Buddhist Master Tian Chan. As such, even though Han Li had also been affected somewhat from afar, he was able to easily break out of the illusion with his immense spiritual sense, then arrived above the restrictions just in the nick of time. The stone spirit became even more furious at the sight of this new enemy. Yellow flames suddenly erupted from its body, and the flames were sent sweeping toward Han Li in a frenzy. These flames were none other than the glacial demonic flames that it had only attained after cultivating underground for tens of thousands of years. As opposed to being alarmed by these oncoming flames, he merely chuckled and flipped a hand over to produce a small black mountain. He laid a hand onto the mountain, and it instantly swelled to over 100 feet in size. A row of silver runes appeared on the mountain at Han Li's behest, following which a vast expanse of gray light swept forth before forming a gray vortex in midair. As soon as the yellow demonic flames came into contact with the gray vortex, a rumbling boom akin to a thunderclap erupted, and the flames were all drawn into the vortex. As a result, the gray vortex expanded slightly, but didn't display any other reaction. The Pipe Dream Stone Spirit let loose a sharp cry upon seeing this, and an earth-shattering boom abruptly erupted from within the gray vortex. The vortex tremored violently before shattering, and the yellow demonic flames sprang forth from within it before transforming into a yellow fiery toad that pounced directly toward Han Li. Even before the fiery toad had reached Han Li, he was struck by a burst of glacial power that threatened to freeze even his soul. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. The demonic flames were indeed rather troublesome to deal with, but he naturally wasn't going to be fearful of it. He reached out and made a grabbing motion toward the fiery toad, upon which a huge white hand with 5 colored glacial flames burning around it emerged. The giant hand then shot forth toward the fiery toad like lightning, and perhaps the fiery toad knew that it wouldn't be able to evade the hand or simply had no intention of taking evasive measures. In any case, it jumped straight into the massive hand, upon which the fingers of the hand closed tightly around it while 5 colored glacial flames swelled drastically. A dull thump rang out as the fiery toad instantly exploded, reverting back into a wave of fire that swept toward the huge hand. However, the 5 colored glacial flames were also a type of glacial flames, so it was able to hold its own against the yellow demonic flames. Right at this moment, Han Li pointed a finger toward the black mountain before him, and it abruptly vanished into thin air. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted in the air above the pipe dream stone spirit, and the black mountain re-emerged before crashing down alongside a wave of gray light. A burst of enormous invisible force immediately weighed down upon the stone spirit, making its body very slow and sluggish. It was naturally extremely enraged and alarmed by this, and after struggling a few times to no avail, it immediately opened its mouth to expel a yellow bead. This completely mundane-looking yellow thumb-sized bead was none other than the stone spirit's demon core. The demon core circled around above the stone spirit, and the burst of tremendous force weighing down upon it was forcibly repelled. At the same time, countless yellow fiery snakes erupted out of the demon core before quickly swelling to several tens of feet in length each. The fiery yellow snakes swept upward to intertwine with the gray light, and the black mountain was forcibly kept at bay. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, and he immediately made a hand seal, upon which a pair of translucent wings appeared on his back amid a dull thunderclap. He flapped the wings and abruptly vanished on the spot as an arc of silver lightning. Meanwhile, the stone spirit had just evaded a streak of blue light unleashed by the flying scorpion, and a fierce look appeared on its face as it prepared to unleash an attack in retaliation. However, lightning suddenly flashed behind it, following which Han Li abruptly re-emerged. The pipe dream stone spirit was quite startled by this, and its third demonic eye widened as it prepared to release that scintillating white light again. However, Han Li was already prepared for this. He harumphed coldly as he closed his eyes, and his law destruction eye appeared on his glabella amid a flash of black light. A black thread shot forth out of the law destruction eye and struck the stone spirit's third demonic eye in a flash, scattering the white light that had just begun to gather. Furthermore, in the instant that the stone spirit heard Han Li's cold harumph, it felt as if a thunderclap had erupted right inside its head, and a sudden burst of excruciating spiritual pain made it sway unsteadily in midair. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Han Li immediately rubbed his hands together before raising them up into the air. A loud thunderclap rang out, and countless arcs of golden lightning sprang forth before forming a giant lightning net. The net descended over the stone spirit before abruptly contracting, and by the time the stone spirit recovered from the effects of Han Li's spirit-stunned thorn, it had already been trapped tightly within a net of golden lightning. It was naturally unwilling to be captured, and yellow demonic flames erupted out of its body again as it let loose a sharp cry. The divine devilbane lightning began to melt away in the face of the yellow flames, and it seemed that the stone spirit was about to escape. However, Han Li naturally wasn't going to allow it to get away. A cold smile appeared on his face, yet just as he was about to unleash another attack, Master Black Rain's urgent voice suddenly sounded beside his ears. "Please wait, fellow Taoist Han, my spirit insect will be enough to subdue the stone spirit." Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, and Master Black Rain suddenly let loose a long cry. Almost at the exact same moment, the flying scorpion blurred before conjuring up a dozen or so identical projections of itself. These flying scorpions flapped their wings and vanished on the spot as balls of blue light. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted, and the flying scorpions appeared above the stone spirit before blasting forth streaks of blue light out of their stingers. On this occasion, the stone spirit was completely bound by the golden lightning net, so the blue streaks of light were able to vanish into its body in a flash. A layer of blue mist instantly emerged around the stone spirit's body, and its yellow demonic flames instantly became completely dull and lusterless as if it had encountered the bane of its existence. Within the span of just a few breaths, all the yellow flames were completely snuffed out, and the pipe dreamstone spirit became even more infuriated. It gritted its teeth before inhaling violently, and it quickly expanded like a balloon while an extremely fearsome aura erupted from its body. As soon as Hanli sensed this aura, a thought immediately occurred to him, and his expression changed slightly as he instantly shot back to over 1,000 feet away. At this point, the stone spirit resembled an overinflated ball and was straining against the crackling golden lightning net around it. Master Black Rain harumphed coldly upon seeing this. "You think I'd let you self-detonate?" He then abruptly made a grabbing motion, and a thin net of silver lightning appeared in the air above the mountain summit before immediately descending toward the pipe dreamstone spirit. A rumbling boom rang out as the silver net wound itself tightly around the stone spirit's body, following which Master Black Rain immediately made a hand seal. The lightning net became extremely bright and piercing, and it began to release countless silver runes that transformed the stone spirit into a dazzling ball of silver light. An incredible turn of events then unfolded. Within the silver net, the stone spirit's bulging body quickly began to shrink, and after just the span of a few breaths, it had reverted back to its original size. After that, it was unable to unleash any abilities no matter how hard it tried. The stone spirit was naturally extremely enraged, but was powerless to do anything. Master Black Rain was elated to see this, and he slowly descended from above with a smile on his face. No matter how much you struggle, your efforts will prove to be futile in this silver celestial lightning net, so just settle down and come to the Holy Island with me. Rest assured, we're only borrowing your body, we won't be taking your life." In the instant that the stone spirit had been captured, the illusionary technique it had unleashed was dispelled, and only then did Buddhist Master Tianchan manage to return to his senses. Looks like you managed to complete the mission, Brother Black Rain. I am truly embarrassed by my own lack of contribution. If Brother Han hadn't been present, that thing really would have gotten away," Buddhist Master Tianchan said in a slightly apologetic manner. "You're being far too modest, Buddhist Master Tianchan. Without the pressure you were exerting on the stone spirit, it wouldn't have unleashed its illusionary technique so quickly, and fellow Taoist Han wouldn't have been able to stop it so easily. However, it's indeed true that fellow Taoist Han played a vital role in the completion of our mission," Master Black Rain chuckled. "You're far too kind, fellow Taoist Black Rain. I was only doing what was to be expected of me," Hanli said with a smile, then made a grabbing motion toward the stone spirit. A dull thunderclap rang out, and countless arcs of golden lightning emerged from the silver net before returning to his body. "That's divine Devilbane lightning, right? I've heard that it's an extremely potent weapon against devilish beings." Master Black Rain clicked his tongue with wonder upon seeing this. He then pointed a finger toward the silver net as well, and the net began to flash with lightning while tightening even further at his behest. After a few flashes, the silver net shrank down to a fist-sized ball of silver threads with the stone spirit trapped within it before being drawn up Master Black Rain's sleeve. There are also some other cultivation arts aside from divine Devilbane lightning that are very effective against devilish beings. However, these cultivation arts are either very difficult to use or have been lost in history, so there aren't many people in our human race who possess such cultivation arts. Otherwise, it wouldn't be such a struggle for us to ward off the devilish tribulation, Buddhist Master Tianchan mused as he descended from above while appraising Han Li with a meaningful expression. There's no point in speaking about something that's out of reach. We can only say that fellow Taoist Han was very fortunate to have obtained this divine Devilbane lightning. I heard that when used with a true lightning wield technique, this lightning can pose a threat even to body integration stage devilish lords. It's a pity that our holy island only has the second half of the lightning wield technique. If you ever get the opportunity to do so, I suggest you go and search for it in the primordial world, Brother Han. Perhaps the complete lightning wield technique can be found in one of the foreign races, Master Black Rain suggested with a smile. The lightning wield technique is split up into halves? Han Li's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. He had obtained a type of lightning wield technique from the 4 demon monarchs of the Earth Abyss, and it was quite a powerful technique, but required too much time to set up. Thus, it was impractical for real battles, so he hadn't used it much. Indeed. The first half of the lightning wield technique teaches one how to maximize the lightning's power, while the second half teaches one how to control the divine lightning. Both halves are indispensable, Master Black Rain explained. I see. In that case, I really will have to venture into the primordial world to search for the technique if the opportunity arises. Han Li's expression remained unchanged, but internally he was cursing the 4 demon monarchs. No wonder the lightning wield technique was so impractical. The 4 demon monarchs had only bestowed upon him half of the technique. They had definitely done this on purpose, but then again that was only to be expected. If Hanli had been in their shoes, he would have most likely done the same thing. After chatting for a while longer, Buddhist Master Tian Chan decided to depart. The situation in the Holy Sovereign City isn't all that optimistic, and I've spent a lot of time here already. I have to go back to help the Holy Sovereign guard the city, so I'll be taking my leave now, fellow Taoists. Master Black Rain cupped his fist in a salute and said, "Hee, the Holy Island is in urgent need of this stone spirit, so I'll be heading back as well. Fellow Taoist Han, Buddhist Master Tian Chan, I hope we'll have a chance to meet again following the devilish tribulation. You'll be staying here for a few more days, right, fellow Taoist Han?" "Indeed, I'll be staying here for a while longer to use the earthly hellish flames. I wish both of you a safe and swift journey," Hanli said with a smile as he extended a farewell salute. Moments later, a ball of black light and a streak of white light rose up into the air from the mountain summit, then flew away in different directions. Hanli looked on as the two departed, and after they had disappeared into the distance, his smile gradually faded as he murmured to himself, "The second half of the lightning wheel technique, eh? Looks like I really will have to pay the Holy Island a visit. That'll have to wait until a later date. For now, I have to secure the chaotic yin-yang qi." As soon as his voice trailed off, Han Li's body blurred, and he appeared beside the giant crater before casting his gaze toward the bottom. The crater hadn't been affected much by the battle that had just taken place, and the yellow mist at the bottom was still making it impossible to see what lay in the depths of the crater. Han Li peered into the mist through narrowed eyes for a long while before casting his gaze through the surrounding area, upon which his brows furrowed slightly. All of a sudden, he flipped a hand over to produce a thick stack of formation flags, then flicked his wrist to send the flags scattering in all directions as streaks of light. The formation flags vanished into thin air amid flashes of spiritual light, and in the next instant, a layer of white mist permeated over the mountain, completely concealing Han Li along with the giant crater. Han Li stood still on the spot and swept both sleeves through the air to release 13 balls of buzzing purple light, all of which quickly disappeared into the mist. Immediately thereafter, green light flashed from his body, and a green figure detached itself from him before vanishing into the ground. After doing all that, Han Li sat down with his legs crossed beside the crater. He wore a solemn expression as he made a hand seal, then abruptly laid a hand onto his own head. A ball of golden light flashed, and a nascent soul that was around half a foot tall emerged above his head. The nascent soul bore a striking resemblance to Han Li, and as soon as it emerged, it waved a hand toward Han Li's physical body down below. A loud thunderclap rang out, and a ball that was bound by countless golden threads flew out of Han Li's body before hovering in midair. The nascent soul extended a finger toward the golden ball, and all of the golden threads quickly fell away to reveal a white wooden box. A faint smile appeared on the nascent soul's face, and it began to chant something. As it did so, spatial fluctuations erupted nearby, and a dozen or so 5-colored beads silently emerged. These beads then transformed into eyeballs amid flashes of spiritual light, and bright 5-colored light radiated from their surfaces. Around 10 minutes later, a wisp of Han Li's spiritual sense formed a clone that appeared over a boundless grassland. He swept his gaze over his surroundings, yet failed to discover the presence of Che Qigong. His expression changed slightly as he cast his gaze upward, and discovered that there was a scorching white sun around 100,000 feet above him. After that, Han Li merely stared at the sun in a completely expressionless and unblinking manner. After a while, an unfamiliar male voice suddenly rang out in the air above. "Haha, you really are no ordinary body integration stage being. I didn't think that a mere spiritual sense clone of yours would be able to detect my presence. I can see why old man Che is placing his hope in you now." As soon as the voice faded, a black shadow flashed within the scintillating sun. Immediately thereafter, a ball of black light shot forth before stopping just over 100 feet away from Han Li. This was a burly black-armored heavily bearded man, and he was appraising Han Li with an intrigued smile. Han Li's heart stirred slightly at the sight of this man, but he maintained a calm expression as he asked, "Who are you and where is Senior Che?" "Old man Che is currently doing something else right now. It'll most likely be quite some time before he can get here, so why don't you have a chat with me for now?" the man suggested with a stroke of his beard. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, "I don't seem to recognize you, and I've never heard Senior Che mention the presence of someone else in this devil's ceiling lock." "Of course old man Che wouldn't mention me to you. However, what I can tell you is that I can give you what he promised you, and I won't ask for as much in return," the man replied in a confident manner. "Oh? What do you propose, fellow Taoist?" Han Li asked as his expression changed slightly. "It's quite simple. Old Man Che promised to give you the extraction and refinement methods for chaotic yin-yang qi, right? I'm also familiar with these methods, and I only ask for a third of the chaotic yin-yang qi that you managed to extract," the man immediately proposed. Han Li fell into a contemplative silence upon hearing this before shaking his head in the end. "That does indeed sound quite appealing, but I've already sworn a vow on my inner demons to Senior Che, so I'm afraid I can't accept this offer." The man seemed to have already anticipated this answer from Han Li, and he chuckled. "Hee, you still haven't obtained the extraction and refinement methods from Old Man Che, so you're not going to be breaking your vow." "That's true, but I've never even met you before. Don't you think it's a little naive to simply expect me to trust you right away?" Han Li asked in an indifferent voice. "Of course I'm aware that I'll have to earn your trust, and I'm prepared to do so. Setting aside everything else, I'll give you the extraction method for the chaotic yin-yang qi within this devil's ceiling lock right away, and I'll give you some other benefits after the event as well," the man said with a mysterious smile. "Other benefits?" Han Li's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, and a hesitant look appeared on his face. However, right at this moment, bursts of rumbling suddenly rang out in the surrounding space, and the grassland down below blurred before transforming into a barren desert. On top of that, dark clouds had appeared over the entire sky, and countless silver lightning snakes were dancing within the clouds. "Impossible. How did he manage to get out so quickly?" the man exclaimed as his expression changed drastically. Han Li was naturally also quite startled by this turn of events. An enraged rumbling voice then suddenly rang out from within the dark clouds. "How dare you plot against me like this, Feng Xia? Did you really think you'd be able to get away with this?" The voice belonged to none other than Che Qigong, and the entire heavens were trembling from his fury. The dark clouds up above converged violently to form a massive inky black hand that was around 1,000 feet in size, and it descended toward the burly man with devastating force. Before it had even reached the burly man, a burst of enormous force came crashing down from above, and Han Li's spiritual sense clone was instantly completely immobilized. In the face of this tremendous force, the surrounding acre of desert sank down several tens of feet, creating a gargantuan crater in the sand. The burly man was situated at the center of the crater, and a vast expanse of black light was suddenly released from his suit of armor. In the instant that the burst of tremendous force came into contact with the black light, most of its power was diverted away, and the burly armored man merely swayed slightly but remained completely unscathed. Che Qigong faltered slightly upon seeing this before becoming even more enraged. "You've mastered the great diversion technique? No wonder you dared to do something like this. Let me see if you have what it takes to oppose me." As soon as his voice trailed off, the dark clouds up above surged before forming a massive devilish projection with 3 heads and 6 arms. Just as the projection was about to descend from above, the burly man's expression darkened, and he raised a hand as he yelled, "Stop! Do you not want the chaotic yin-yang qi anymore? Once I take care of you, the chaotic yin-yang qi will be all mine." Che Qigong replied in a vicious voice, and the 6 arms of the devilish projection swept through the air as balls of black qi emerged over its hands. The balls of black qi then transformed into massive balls of light that it prepared to hurl toward the burly man. Do you really think you can extract chaotic yin-yang qi out of the devil ceiling lock using your method?" the burly man asked as a peculiar look appeared on his face. "What do you mean by that? Didn't we devise the method to extract chaotic yin-yang qi from the devil ceiling lock many years ago? Are you trying to make me doubt myself so you can stall?" Che Qigong roared in response, but the devilish projection up above stopped what it was doing nonetheless. "Why would I need to stall for time? Do you think I still fear you after mastering this great diversion technique? I simply don't want both of us to be harmed in an unnecessary battle. As for whether what I say is true or not, if you weren't concerned to begin with, why did you stop?" The burly man chuckled nonchalantly. The giant devilish projection up above fell completely still upon hearing this. Moments later, the devilish projection dissipated into black qi again, and Che Qigong emerged with a dark expression. Han Li quickly assessed the situation before deciding to remain silent and simply watch as everything unfolded. You hid the fact that you'd already mastered the great diversion technique from me for so long, so you must have been plotting this for a very long time. Setting aside whether the technique really is as powerful as it's said to be, you seem to be implying that you've found another method to extract chaotic yin-yang qi. How do I know if you're telling the truth? All of us joined forces to create the original extraction method, yet you expect me to place my trust in something that you devised on your own? Che Qigong scoffed in a cold voice. I only managed to discover a fatal flaw with the original method by chance. As for whether this new method is authentic or not, I'll tell you about it, and you can make the decision for yourself. If you think my method isn't viable, then we can just battle it out here. That bastard Shui Guang will be the only beneficiary to our conflict, but if you insist, I'm certainly not going to back down, the burly man chuckled coldly. Alright, I'll listen to what you have to say, but if it turns out to be nonsense, humph. Che Qigong didn't finish his sentence, but the threat being made was already very apparent. You've made a wise decision. However, if the extraction method that I propose is indeed a viable one, then it would only be right for me to get a third of the chaotic yin-yang qi that's extracted, right? The burly man chuckled while reiterating his condition in an implacable voice. We'll discuss that after I verify the feasibility of your extraction method, Che Qigong replied in a cold manner. Thus, Feng Xie's lips tremored as he transmitted his voice to Che Qigong while Han Li looked on in silence. A day later, a ball of black light was flying through the air over a murky gray mountain range at an incredible speed. Within the black light was a thin elderly man. It was none other than Master Black Rain, who had just separated from Han Li not long ago. He was currently flying at full speed en route back to the Holy Island. Two massive mountains, both of which were around 100,000 feet tall, loomed in the distance right in his path. Thus, Master Black Rain diverted slightly off his original path to fly through the gap between the two mountains. After just a few flashes, the ball of black light had reached the area between the two mountains, yet just as it was about to pass through, two earth-shattering booms suddenly erupted without any warning. The two mountains tremored violently, then crashed down viciously toward Master Black Rain in unison. Even before the mountains had struck the ball of black light, countless rocks and stones were already raining down from above. Master Black Rain was naturally greatly alarmed by this, but he remained calm and quickly made a hand seal before expelling a small silver bell out of his mouth. A bell chime rang out, and the small bell instantly manifested a silver projection that was over 1,000 tall, which completely encompassed Master Black Rain. At the same time, a series of silver sound waves swept forth in all directions, pulverizing all of the falling rocks and stones they came into contact with. Gray light flashed between the mountains, and two massive hands constructed from countless rocks and stones suddenly extended out of the mountains. Each hand was several thousand feet in size and imbued with boundless power. Two earth-shattering booms rang out as the gargantuan hands struck the bell projection from two sides. The bell was quite a powerful treasure, but in the face of such a devastating blow, the projection was still instantly destroyed. A hint of panic finally began to appear on Master Black Rain's face upon seeing this, and he immediately swept a sleeve through the air to release a ball of silver light. A loud thunderclap rang out, and a net that was constructed from countless arcs of silver lightning was unfurled. This was none other than the silver celestial lightning net. With this net's profound abilities, he would be safe from any assailant. Feeling a lot more reassured, Master Black Rain began to chant something while making a grabbing motion with one hand, and several balls of spiritual light appeared over his palm in unison. However, just as he was about to summon other treasures to retaliate against his assailant, an incredible turn of events suddenly unfolded. Spatial fluctuations erupted nearby, and a slender hand that was as fair as jade suddenly emerged. The hand made a casual grabbing motion and caught the lightning net in its grasp. As the 5 fingers of the hand clenched around the net, Master Black Rain was struck by a burst of excruciating pain in his soul. At the same time, he lost his spiritual sense connection with the silver celestial lightning net, and he involuntarily yelled as he began to sway unsteadily in midair. During this split-second delay, the two massive stone hands converged viciously like a pair of small mountains. In response, Master Black Rain could only hurriedly summon a suit of green armor that appeared over his body. However, the two gigantic stone palms were simply far too powerful. An earth-shattering boom rang out, and Master Black Rain's physical body was crushed into a cloud of blood mist, while his protective spiritual light and suit of green armor were both also instantly destroyed. A ball of black light shot out of the blood mist, then vanished into thin air in a flash. A peal of pleasant laughter then rang out as the hand that was holding the silver lightning net extended a finger, flicking it toward the direction that the ball of black light had just disappeared in. A ball of silver light shot forth and also instantly disappeared. In the next instant, a dull thump rang out, and the ball of black light stumbled out of thin air over 1,000 feet away. As soon as it re-emerged, it immediately continued to flee into the distance like a speeding arrow. Within the black light was a purple nascent soul that was several inches tall. The nascent soul was completely identical to Master Black Rain in appearance, but its face was completely pale, and it wore a horrified expression. "It's too late to try and get away now," the female voice chuckled coldly. The slender hand then waved through the air, and the lightning net it was holding abruptly vanished, only to be replaced by an antiquated mirror, which was swept toward Master Black Rain's nascent soul from afar. A pillar of black light shot forth from the mirror and encompassed the nascent soul in a flash. The nascent soul immediately felt the air around it tighten, following which a burst of enormous suction force stopped it cold in its tracks before forcibly dragging it backward. Master Black Rain was truly petrified now. In his desperation, his nascent soul let loose a low roar as it expelled a triangular badge, then released several balls of blood essence, all of which vanished into the badge as blood mist. As the item that Master Black Rain had assigned to protect his nascent soul, this triangular badge was naturally quite a powerful treasure, and it transformed into a ball of azure light that encompassed the entire nascent soul. Immediately thereafter, the nascent soul's backward momentum was arrested, and it was able to continue fleeing from the scene. "That's an infernal azure badge of the human race. I was a little too careless." The pleasant female voice rang out again, but on this occasion, it was tinged with a hint of surprise. Spatial fluctuations erupted, and the owner of the slender hand silently emerged, revealing herself to be a woman in a blue palatial dress. The woman had a set of gorgeous facial features that were as fair as jade, and her figure was also very alluring, but her eyes gave off an azure light that was rather unsettling to behold. In the instant that she emerged, she cast her gaze toward the nascent soul in the distance, then made an extremely profound hand seal. Immediately thereafter, a devilish projection with 3 heads and 6 arms appeared behind her, and it transformed into a fearsome black-armored devilish being amid a flash of black light. The suit of armor being worn by the devilish being was extremely intricate in design, with layers upon layers of complex runes inscribed on its surface. The devilish being's 3 faces were completely concealed by black visors, and as soon as it appeared, it raised its 3 heads to the heavens and let loose a long cry. Its 6 eyes flashed like 6 balls of azure flames, and it made a grabbing motion toward the nascent soul with all 6 of its hands in unison. A peculiar scene then ensued. An ear-splitting boom rang out as 6 black vortexes appeared at the same time, then exploded in unison, causing a massive commotion in the process. The entire space collapsed as an even larger vortex appeared in front of the woman, and the vortex released countless black runes that vanished into thin air as countless specks of black light. All of a sudden, the nascent soul that was fleeing in the distance was struck by a bone-chilling sensation, yet before it had a chance to react, an identical black vortex abruptly appeared in the air above it. A black devilish claw that was enshrouded in devilish flames shot out of the vortex like lightning, and the nascent soul only had a chance to cry out in alarm before it was caught by the devilish claw and pulled back into the vortex. The vortex then rapidly shrank before vanishing into nothingness, and it was as if it had never appeared there in the first place. In contrast, the vortex in front of the woman still remained, and was slowly rotating on the spot. A faint smile appeared on the woman's face as she raised a hand and made a grabbing motion toward the vortex, upon which a ball of black light emerged from within. It was none other than Master Black Rain's nascent soul. The nascent soul's eyes were tightly shut, and its face was deathly pale. Its entire body had been bound tightly by black threads, and it had been captured alive. The woman aimed an expressionless glance at the nascent soul, then swept a sleeve downward. A burst of black light instantly swept forth, picking up an item from the ground before delivering it into her hand. The item was a storage bracelet that was glowing with faint yellow light, and the woman pointed a finger at it while closing her eyes at the same time. Moments later, the woman reopened her eyes and murmured to herself, "Oh? A pipe dream stone spirit, eh? That's quite interesting. That man must have been sent here with the sole purpose of capturing this stone spirit. No wonder Lu Ji asked me to make this trip in person. It looks like the humans are plotting something. We'll have to keep a closer eye on them from now on. If I want to investigate this matter, I'll have to search that man's soul, but all high-grade human cultivators have special secret techniques that they use to lock their own spiritual sense. I can break through with my devilish arts and through brute force, but I'll still only be able to search a very small portion of his soul. I wonder if that portion will just so happen to contain the information I need." With that in mind, the woman didn't hesitate any longer. She swept a hand toward the vortex, and it disappeared along with the devilish being behind her, leaving only Master Black Rain's nascent soul hovering on the spot. She flipped a hand over to produce that antiquated black mirror again before waving it toward the nascent soul, and a burst of black light surged forth to draw the nascent soul directly into the mirror. Find a secluded place where I won't be disturbed. I'm going to search this human cultivator's soul. With my current powers, it'll most likely take quite a few days before an outcome can be reached, the woman said in a nonchalant manner as she stowed the antiquated mirror away, as if she were issuing an instruction to someone. Yes, Mistress Yuan Cha. 1, 2 rumbling voices rang out from the 2 giant mountains nearby, following which the 2 gargantuan stone palms were slowly withdrawn. A flash of gray light then appeared, and following the span of just a few breaths, the 2 mountains had transformed into a pair of giants, each of which was over 10,000 feet tall. The 2 giants were covered in gray rocks and stones, and each of them had 4 arms, creating a terrifying sight to behold. Thank you for helping me destroy that man's physical body, elders. Otherwise, it would have been a lot more troublesome for me to capture him. The woman was speaking to the 2 giants in a very polite manner. It's our honor to be able to lend you our assistance, Mistress Yuan Cha, one of the giants said as a barely discernible smile appeared on its rocky face. 1. Immortal Galaxy Tree, AWSHIT. She's finally here. The woman nodded in response before sweeping her sleeves through the air, releasing 2 bursts of white light that vanished into the bodies of the 2 giants. A string of cracks and pops rang out from the giants' bodies, and they quickly shrank down to a pair of first-sized gray stone balls, both of which then instantly disappeared up the woman's sleeve. After that, a black cloud emerged beneath the woman's feet, then encompassed her body as she flew away toward a certain direction. Han Li's eyelids fluttered slightly as he sat beside the giant crater. He slowly opened his eyes and a peculiar look appeared on his face. He had just withdrawn his spiritual sense clone from within the devil sealing lock, and he murmured to himself, from the looks of it, that chaotic yin-yang chi must be extremely important to both of the devils. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten into such a heated altercation. Will the 2 of them be able to escape from the devil sealing lock right away after obtaining the chaotic yin-yang chi? No, surely not. The devil sealing lock is an incomplete profound heavenly treasure. No matter how incredible that chaotic yin-yang chi is, there's no way it could have such a miraculous effect. Those 2 are most likely plotting something else. After contemplating the issue for a while, Han Li seemed to have suddenly arrived at a decision. There's no need for me to overthink this. After I split the chaotic yin-yang chi with those 2 devils, I'll find a way to toss the devil sealing lock back into the Elder Devil realm. I have to make a trip there anyway, I'll just drop off the devil sealing lock then. Those 2 are nothing more than spiritual sense entities without physical bodies anyway. Who cares what'll become of them once they escape from the devil sealing lock in the Elder Devil realm? With that in mind, Han Li pointed a finger toward the devil sealing lock before him, and it shot forth directly toward the giant crater before hovering right over its center. Immediately thereafter, Han Li took a deep breath before making a hand seal while chanting something, and a projection with 3 heads and 6 arms appeared behind him. The projection made hand seals with all 6 of its arms, and a vast expanse of golden light swept forth from its body before vanishing into the devil sealing lock. As a result, the surface of the white wooden box instantly took on a shimmering golden color, as if a coat of molten gold had been applied to it. Right at this moment, a layer of azure light appeared on Han Li's face, and he let loose a low cry before pointing a finger at the wooden box again. A burst of silver flames emerged from his fingertip before enveloping the wooden box, and at the same time, the golden projection behind Han Li opened all 6 of its eyes in unison. It then strode directly toward the burning wooden box, covering a distance of over 100 feet in just a few flashes before reaching out to grab onto the box. After that, the projection carried the box and descended slowly toward the bottom of the giant crater. Even though it wasn't descending very quickly, it still disappeared into the yellow mist down below after the span of just a few breaths. Han Li continued to chant his incantation while making different hand seals, and a burst of indescribable glacial chi soon began to emanate from his body. A layer of faint yellow frost spread over the ground around him, and moments later the azure light on Han Li's face faded while his entire body was enveloped by a layer of yellow light. At the same time, a layer of yellow frost also began to appear over his body, and at this point, the yellow mist within the crater was already churning violently. An occasional rumbling boom would ring out from underground, as if there were something constantly exploding within the depths of the crater. Han Li's expression remained unchanged, and he seemed to be paying no heed to the changes taking place on his body. He merely continued to do what he was doing without pause. Time slowly passed by, and 7 days and 7 nights had flown past. Han Li was still seated beside the giant crater. If a normal cultivator with inferior magic power, spiritual sense, and physical constitution had been in his place, they would have most likely already collapsed. Even for Han Li, this was quite a taxing endeavor, and he was beginning to feel rather weary. At this point, the rumbling booms echoing deep within the giant crater had already receded. The churning of the yellow mist had also become a lot less violent, and it was clear that the secret technique that he was unleashing was in its closing stages. All of a sudden, a loud boom that was akin to a rumbling thunderclap erupted from the bottom of the crater, and countless rays of golden light erupted upward, piercing through the layers of mist and completely illuminating the entire giant crater. Success! Han Li couldn't help but exclaim in an excited manner as his eyes lit up. If he could obtain this chaotic yin-yang qi, then he would definitely be able to progress to the late body integration stage in a short time. If he could reach that level, then both his magic power and abilities would be enhanced significantly, and he would be far better equipped to protect himself during the devilish tribulation, as well as the trip into the Elder Devil realm. With that in mind, he immediately sprang into action. A layer of 5-colored flames appeared over his body, and all of the yellow frost was melted away. He then raised a hand and made a grabbing motion toward the bottom of the crater, upon which the mist within surged violently, and the golden projection slowly re-emerged. It was still holding the wooden box, but there was now an azure ball of light contained within its body. The ball of light was around the size of an egg and completely mundane in appearance, but it contained 2 precise specks of light, one of which was black while the other was white. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, but in the next instant, his smile abruptly stiffened, and he cast his gaze upward with an alarmed look in his eyes. Almost at the exact same moment, an earth-shattering boom erupted up above, following which a burst of devastating force struck the restrictions in the air. In the face of this ferocious attack, the restriction was instantly shattered, and the mist enshrouding the mountain summit was completely swept away by a gust of fierce wind. A slender female figure then appeared up above before casting her gaze toward Han Li in a cold manner. Her gaze was as frosty as ice, and Han Li's face was struck by a pang of sharp pain under her cold gaze. Looks like the information I obtained from searching that human cultivator's soul was accurate, the woman mused in a cold voice, and Han Li's heart jolted upon hearing this. He didn't know who this woman was, but judging from her aura, she was clearly a high-grade devilish being. Han Li was naturally very perplexed and alarmed, but there was no time for him to ponder the situation. He abruptly reached out with one hand before making a grabbing motion, and the golden projection transformed into a ball of golden light that hurtled directly toward Han Li with the wooden box and that ball of azure light contained within it. The woman faltered slightly upon seeing this, but after she caught sight of the wooden box and the ball of azure light, her expression instantly changed drastically. That's the devil sealing lock and chaotic yin-yang qi. I see, so you were extracting chaotic yin-yang qi using the earthly hellish flames here. The woman immediately swept a sleeve through the air as she spoke, and a white piece of fabric instantly shot forth. After just a single flash, it covered a distance of several thousand feet, appearing directly above the golden projection before descending like lightning. This was a massive white silk handkerchief that was around 10 feet in size. Its surface was riddled with shimmering silver runes, and it was clearly a powerful treasure. The woman was attempting to use this treasure to intercept the devil sealing lock and chaotic yin-yang qi. Almost at the exact same moment, violent tremors ran through the ground on either side of the giant crater, and countless rocks and stones were sent flying in all directions as 2 massive gray stone hands erupted out of the ground. The 2 huge hands clamped viciously toward Han Li, and before they had even struck him, 2 bursts of immense invisible force had crashed down upon him. Han Li was naturally quite alarmed and enraged by this, but he didn't panic in the slightest. He harumphed coldly while making a hand seal, then uttered the word, "Explode." The golden light that enveloped the wooden box and the chaotic yin-yang qi flashed violently before exploding into a golden halo. The space in the wake of this golden halo warped and twisted, and the white silk handkerchief was forced to a momentary standstill. Taking advantage of this opportunity, a huge green hand suddenly appeared out of thin air before instantly catching the wooden box and azure ball of light. Immediately thereafter, the massive hand transformed into a green humanoid figure. It was none other than Han Li's spirit body. As soon as the spirit body appeared, it made a hand seal and vanished on the spot as a ball of green light. At the same time, golden light flashed from Han Li's body, and he began to swell drastically in size while sprouting thick golden fur. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a giant golden ape that was over 100 feet tall, and the tremendous force weighing down upon him was instantly completely nullified. As soon as Han Li completed his transformation, he let loose a thunderous roar and launched his fists viciously toward the oncoming giant stone palms. Two earth-shattering booms erupted, and Han Li gave a muffled groan as he was forced back several steps, while large sections of the two massive stone hands were reduced to rubble and shrapnel. Right at this moment, spatial fluctuations erupted behind Han Li, and the spirit body emerged while holding the wooden box and the ball of azure light before vanishing into Han Li's body. At the same time, Han Li let loose an enraged roar as he opened his mouth to expel a thick pillar of golden light directly toward the woman up above. As for Han Li himself, he transformed into a giant silver four-winged bird with silver arcs of lightning flashing all over its body. He spread his four wings and vanished into thin air as an azure and white thread of light. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted several thousand feet away, and the thread of light re-emerged before instantly disappearing again. This woman clearly possessed unfathomable powers, and Han Li currently wasn't in his best condition, so he immediately chose to flee. In this four-winged Kunping form, he was too fast even for the three Shui Guang clones to catch, so he was very confident in his ability to escape. The woman waved a hand through the air to release a streak of inky black sword qi, which vanquished the oncoming golden pillar of light with ease. However, during that brief delay, Han Li had already traveled so far into the distance that he was nothing more than a barely visible black dot on the horizon. You think you can get away from me? How delusional. A cold light flashed through the woman's eyes as she cast her gaze toward the fleeing black dot in the distance. She waved a hand downward, and the two stone giants completely emerged from the ground down below. As they flew up into the air, they converged to form a giant dazzling ball of gray light at the woman's behest. The woman then transformed into a ball of black qi before vanishing into the massive ball of light, and moments later, the dazzling light receded to reveal a stone hall that was several hundred feet tall. The hall was entirely gray in color with a dozen or so crude stone pillars, giving off a rather primitive sense of beauty and artistry. The woman stood at the center of the hall, then gently tapped a foot down onto it before commanding it to give chase. A layer of white spiritual light instantly appeared over the surface of the stone hall, and it shot forth like a shooting star in pursuit of Han Li. The stone hall appeared to be quite bulky and maladroit, but it covered a distance of around 1,000 feet after just a single flash, and it wasn't much slower than the four-winged Kunpeng that Han Li had transformed into. Han Li had also naturally discovered this, and he became even more reluctant to engage his pursuer in battle. The woman clearly wasn't an ordinary devilish lord, and he certainly wasn't willing to face her in his current lackluster condition. Furthermore, not only did the woman's aura strike him with a sense of extreme peril, it was also rather familiar to him. It would be very unwise for Han Li to engage her in battle before ascertaining her identity. Even though he was only slightly faster than his pursuer in his Kunpeng form, the gap between them would still constantly be widening, so he would eventually be able to completely shake her off. The woman had to be aware of this as well, so Han Li was rather perplexed about what her intentions were. However, he had no time to consider such matters at the moment. He was focused solely on fleeing the scene as quickly as he could. At their astonishing speeds, a distance of hundreds of thousands of kilometers had been covered after just a single hour. At this point, Han Li had already opened up a gap of several tens of kilometers between himself and the stone hall. This was naturally an extremely far distance for the average person, but for beings of Han Li's caliber, it was a distance that could be covered in mere moments. Even so, the gap was still steadily widening, and Han Li's heart finally eased slightly as he began to ponder exactly who this woman was. Meanwhile, the woman was seated on a stone chair at the center of the hall, casting her cold gaze straight ahead in an unblinking manner. This human brat was nothing more than an ant in a lower realm the last time I encountered him, but since then he's progressed to the mid-body integration stage in less than 2,000 years and attained such a powerful transformation technique. It appears that he's not to be underestimated. However, he's dreaming if he thinks he can get away from me with these trifling abilities alone. Shurgan, initiate instantaneous teleportation right away. I'm sure you've had enough time to lock onto him, the woman commanded with a cold expression. In response, a giant rough face took shape on the ceiling of the stone hall, and it replied, Yes, Mistress Yuan Cha. The two of us will initiate teleportation right away, but there's still a potential margin for error of around 500 meters that you'll need to account for. 500 meters is nothing. I'll be able to stop him for sure, the woman said in a nonchalant manner. Yes. The giant face immediately gave an affirmative reply, and in the next instant the stone hall suddenly stopped in midair. Immediately thereafter, two different strange voices began to chant an incantation, and countless five-colored runes emerged over the surface of the stone hall amid a flash of spiritual light. These runes were extremely profound, and they flashed violently before detaching themselves from the stone hall, dispersing through the air to form a massive five-colored formation. The stone hall was situated right at the center of the formation, and it vanished on the spot after a flash of dazzling light. In the next instant, Hanli suddenly felt a burst of spatial fluctuations appear around 500 meters behind him, and his heart jolted as he turned around, just in time to see a giant formation appear out of thin air. Five-colored light flashed, and a massive object began to emerge from the formation. Crap. Hanli was adept in formations and instantaneous teleportation techniques himself, so he was naturally immediately able to identify this as a teleportation formation. As such, he immediately stopped in his flight while a vertical black demonic eye appeared on his glabella. This was none other than Han Li's Law Destruction Eye, and he was forcibly using it in his Kunpeng form. This was something that would have been completely beyond his capabilities back before he reached the body integration stage. As soon as the Law Destruction Eye appeared, it expelled a black thread that was as thin as a strand of hair. The black thread then instantly transformed into a thick inky black pillar of light that vanished into thin air in a flash. A resounding boom rang out, and the black pillar of light appeared right in front of the teleportation formation before striking it with devastating force. Black and five-colored light immediately intertwined to inundate the entire formation, and after unleashing the attack, the Law Destruction Eye on Han Li's glabella instantly vanished. Immediately thereafter, he flapped his wings and continued to flee, choosing to unleash no further attacks. Han Li was clearly aware that the attack from his Law Destruction Eye wouldn't actually be able to harm his pursuer, which was why he had made such a quick decision to continue flying away. As it turned out, he was right. After the explosion of black and five-colored light receded, the space at the center of the giant formation warped and blurred, following which the giant stone hall emerged in a slightly unsteady manner. Under the influence of the chaotic spatial powers in the nearby area, the stone hall was unable to immediately continue pursuing Han Li. Instead, a white light barrier had appeared around it, and it was swaying incessantly amid the violent spatial fluctuations. He has a Law Destruction Eye. The woman's expression darkened upon making this realization. After just a few flashes, Han Li was nothing more than a black spot on the horizon again. "Chase him down," the woman commanded in an enraged voice. The giant stone face appeared once again on the ceiling of the hall, and it said in an apologetic manner, "I'm afraid we won't be able to give chase right away, mistress. Due to the disruption from spatial powers, we'll only be able to continue after making some adjustments. By the time you're done, that human brat will be completely gone. Let me lend you a hand." The woman harumphed coldly before gripping onto the smooth armrests of her stone chair, then injected a burst of inky black devilish chi into it. "Thank you for your assistance, Mistress Yuan Cha. We'll be able to continue right away now," the stone face said in an elated manner. Thus, not long after that, the stone hall shot forth through the air again. Even though the stone hall had failed to stop Han Li, the distance between the two had been closed down significantly, and the woman continued to give chase with renewed determination. Thus, whenever Han Li managed to widen the gap between himself and the stone hall, the woman would make use of its teleportation ability to close the gap. Having learned her lesson from the first teleportation, she made sure not to get too close to Han Li during her subsequent teleportations. Thus, even with his Law Destruction Eye, Han Li was unable to thwart her teleportation any further. This was naturally quite worrying for Han Li. He also had his lightning formation that he could use for teleportation, but he was unable to control the destination at all. 1. If he were to only teleport over a short distance, there was a possibility that he could end up right next to his pursuer. If he wanted to teleport over a longer distance, then he would require more time to set up the formation, so that wasn't a viable option either. Furthermore, even if he could teleport himself thousands of kilometers away, he still wouldn't be able to escape the woman's spiritual sense detection, and she'd simply catch up again eventually. It seemed that she was even more difficult to shake off than the three clones of sacred ancestor Shui Guang. Thus, the two continued to fly through the air for over half a day. Due to the fact that Hanli had intentionally chosen a very sparsely populated path, he didn't encounter any devilish beings that could impede him along the way. However, the woman clearly wasn't going to let him off the hook, so he had to think of a way to shake her off. Unbeknownst to him, the woman was currently communicating with another devilish being through her antiquated black mirror. 1. Immortal Galaxy Tree. Wonder if the author meant a hastily set up formation? Since Hanli did use the lightning formation to kill that armored giant right at the start of the Deep Heaven City battle, albeit that was an extremely short distance that he was able to see with his own eyes. The image in the mirror depicted a crimson-robed young man, and he had a rather dark expression on his face. Yuan Cha? When did you send a clone into the spirit realm? If I recall correctly, you're not on the list of the sacred ancestors designated to descend into this realm. Shui Guang, I only sent a clone of mine into this realm to assist Lu Ji. I'm not ruling over any army, and I don't have any intention of getting my true body to descend into this realm, so I'm not breaking my agreement with everyone. As such, you have no right to accuse me of anything, the woman replied in an expressionless manner. Shui Guang was furious, but he was clearly also rather wary of the woman, and he harumphed coldly, "Humph, no matter how you try to explain it, you're just twisting the narrative. Setting that aside for now, if you're assisting Lu Ji, then why have you appeared in this area that I'm overseeing? Don't you owe me an explanation for that? Don't tell me that the detection treasure in my battle canoe is yielding a false result. I am indeed currently in the area that you're overseeing, and I'm pursuing a human cultivator. This is an order from Lu Ji as well, so what I'm doing is definitely beneficial to the army of our holy race," the woman replied as her expression eased slightly. "You're pursuing a human cultivator? With those 2 giant stone devils up your sleeve, surely no human under the Grand Ascension stage can escape from you. However, seeing as this is a matter that concerns the entire army of our holy race, it would be unbefitting of me to not lend you my assistance. I'll send out a clone of mine to meet up with you right away," Shui Guang said in a meaningful voice. "It sounds like you still doubt me. By the way, I've heard that you sent your 3 clones into the spirit realm. Aren't you afraid that something will happen to your true body in our holy realm? Besides, don't you think it's too late for you to send out a clone now? By the time your clone gets here, I'll have already taken care of the human cultivator here," the woman said as a cold smile appeared on her face. "I have no need to explain myself to you. My clone isn't far away from where you are right now. It should be able to meet up with you in about half a day. I just so happen to have borrowed the all-encompassing plate from Du Long. I'm sure it'll be of assistance to you," Shui Guang replied. "What? How did you get Du Long to lend you his all-encompassing plate? He values that treasure as much as his own life." A stunned look appeared on the woman's face upon hearing this. "Hee, anything can be borrowed as long as the price is right. Who's this human cultivator that you're currently pursuing? They must be an extremely important figure in the human race to get away from you. I'll contact my clones right away so they can ambush him from the front, and we'll trap him from both sides," Shui Guang proposed. The woman was silent for a moment before replying in a serious manner. "You can help me hunt him down, but I've had a run-in with him in a lower realm in the past, so after we capture him, you have to leave him to me. Otherwise, I'd rather take care of him on my own, even if it means I'll have to expend a bit more time." "He's crossed you in a lower realm? That's quite interesting. I heard that a spiritual sense clone of yours was killed in a lower realm. Could the perpetrator be the human cultivator that you're currently pursuing? Haha, what a coincidence." Shui Guang chuckled as a mocking look appeared on his face. "If you contacted me just to mock me, then there's no need for us to communicate any further." The woman's expression darkened as she raised a hand to cut off the communication. However, Shui Guang suddenly raised a hand to stop her. "Hold on. I agree to your condition. However, after this you have to help me do something as well, and after that's done you have to leave the area that I'm overseeing." "What do you need help with?" The woman was rather surprised to hear this. "It's quite simple. I also need you to help me take care of a human cultivator," Shui Guang immediately replied. "Didn't your 3 clones descend into this realm already? Why do you still need my assistance? You're not trying to recruit this clone of mine to attack a Grand Ascension stage human cultivator, are you?" the woman asked with furrowed brows. "Hee, rest assured I wouldn't be willing to sacrifice these clones of mine to attack a Grand Ascension stage being. The human I'm targeting is a body integration cultivator, but he possesses many powerful treasures and abilities. I did indeed send my 3 clones into this realm, but they're not carrying my most powerful treasures, which is why I was unable to take that human down. With your assistance, I'm sure the outcome will be different, Shui Guang replied with a smile. The woman's expression eased upon hearing this and she said, if it's a body integration stage human cultivator, then I have no objections. You have yourself a deal. Tell me how to contact those clones of yours. Shui Guang naturally gave an affirmative reply before pointing a finger forward to release a string of silver runes out of the mirror. Meanwhile, Han Li was still hurtling through the air up ahead, completely oblivious to the fact that his two almighty devilish enemies had unknowingly joined forces to hunt him down. He was racking his brains for a way out of this situation as he flew, but was unable to think of anything right away. Not long ago he had just faced sacred ancestor Shui Guang's clones, and he had expended most of his temporary formation treasures, so he was lacking the resources to keep his pursuer at bay. Furthermore, he had no idea what type of abilities the devilish woman possessed, and that made it very difficult for him to formulate a plan against her. After thinking for a long while, he decided that he had to ascertain the woman's powers and abilities first before he could think about anything else. After all, only by knowing one's enemy could one assure victory. With that in mind, countless feathers suddenly shot forth from his Kunpeng body before transforming into talismans and formation tools. He set up a dozen or so traps of different sizes, then continued on his way. A short while later, a string of loud explosions erupted behind him, and the spiritual sense connection he had with those traps was instantly severed. His heart immediately sank upon seeing this. Judging from the speed at which the woman had broken through all of the traps he had set, he could ascertain that she was even more powerful than he had anticipated. Her powers were definitely far superior to those of the average devilish lord, and she was comparable to the 3 Shui Guang clones. Furthermore, the familiar aura that she was giving off reminded him of a fearsome enemy, and the mere thought of her sent chills running down his spine. Could it be that this woman was a clone of that sacred ancestor Yuan Cha? In that case, it wasn't all that strange that she was so determined to hunt him down. Indeed, after some careful consideration, Han Li finally realized that the aura of this woman was rather similar to that of the soul fragment of sacred ancestor Yuan Cha that he had encountered, and that was quite an uneasy thought for him. After arriving at this realization, he was even more determined to refrain from engaging the woman in battle, and continued to flee as quickly as he could. He had already formulated a plan. The stone hall could teleport, but that would undoubtedly expend far more magic power than normal flight. As such, there was a very good chance that he would be able to outlast her in a contest of endurance. Thus, he had made up his mind to keep fleeing, even though flying at such a rapid speed was also quite taxing to him. After that, he no longer tried to set up any traps or formations. He merely summoned some pills and top-grade spirit stones that he used to replenish his lost magic power. The stone hall continued to give chase behind him, and half a day flew by in the blink of an eye. They had flown over a desert in the primordial world and arrived in the air above a swamp. The sky was very clear, and there was nothing obstructing Han Li's field of view aside from a few lazy white clouds. Han Li could sense that the frequency of the stone hall's teleportation was gradually beginning to drop off, and a hint of elation welled up in his heart. Right at this moment, a slightly feeble voice suddenly sounded in his spiritual sense. "Look out, master, I can sense the aura of an enemy up ahead." The voice was very tender and seemed to belong to a child. Han Li was very startled by this voice. He immediately stopped in midair before hurriedly asking, "Who's there? Do you not recognize me, master? I'm the leopard Kirin beast. I only just awakened and will need to go into hibernation again soon, but I can clearly sense that there are enemies up ahead who bear ill will toward you," the owner of the childish voice said in an urgent manner, then fell silent after a tender yawn. Han Li was quite bewildered to hear this. The leopard Kirin beast had been hibernating for several centuries, yet it had suddenly woken up at a time like this to issue those words of caution to him. Furthermore, the fact that it was now able to speak also came as quite a surprise to him. What was the enemy that the beast had just mentioned? Why hadn't he been able to sense anything? As these thoughts rapidly flashed through Han Li's mind, he quickly cast his gaze through the surrounding area while releasing his enormous spiritual sense in all directions. However, he couldn't sense anything suspicious nearby, and a hesitant look appeared on his face. Meanwhile, there were 3 crimson-robed figures standing side by side within a mysterious treasure, appraising a giant hovering crystalline screen together. On the surface of the massive screen was the image of a giant bird with silver arcs of lightning revolving all around its body. The massive bird had 2 pairs of wings, and was appraising its surroundings with a suspicious and bewildered look in its eyes. Who would have thought that this would be the human cultivator that Yuan Cha is pursuing? That makes things a lot easier for me. The crimson figure standing in the middle chuckled coldly with barely repressed rage in his voice. The crimson figure was none other than one of the sacred ancestor Shui Guang's clones. Don't celebrate too early. Don't forget the condition that we initially proposed to Yuan Cha, another identical clone reminded in a calm voice. Humph, seeing as Yuan Cha is pursuing the same target as us, the condition we raised will naturally have to be changed. We can hand that man over to her, but we didn't promise to hand over his treasures to her as well, sacred ancestor Shui Guang harumphed coldly in response. I'm not sure Yuan Cha would be willing to accept such an arrangement. We can split her some of the treasures, but we have to recover the devil sealing lock and purple word cauldron, the clone said with a shake of his head. Split her some of the treasures? That human brat clearly possesses many powerful treasures. Are you willing to pass them up? Sacred ancestor Shui Guang asked with pursed lips. We have no choice. Don't forget that she has the backing of Lu Ji. Now would not be a good time to mess with her, the clone replied in a solemn manner. Indeed, that Lu Ji is quite a big problem. A hint of wariness appeared on sacred ancestor Shui Guang's face. Alright, stop getting ahead of yourselves. We might not even be able to capture that human brat. He seems to have sensed our presence, so it most likely won't be possible to ambush him, the final clone said. He sensed our presence? Surely not. We've already concealed everything with the all-encompassing plate. There's no way that he'll be able to sense us unless he's a Grand Ascension cultivator. At the very most, he's only become suspicious that there's someone nearby. With Yuan Cha hot on his heels, he won't be able to remain here for long, sacred ancestor Shui Guang said in an unconvinced manner. Is that so? I don't think that's... Hold on, what is he doing? The final clone faltered mid-sentence before letting loose a cry of alarm. The expressions on the faces of the other two clones also changed drastically upon seeing what Han Li was doing in the image. Han Li suddenly opened his massive beak to expel a shimmering golden ball of lightning, which swelled to around 10 feet in size in a flash. The ball of lightning then shot forth directly toward the three clones as a dazzling bolt of lightning. A loud thunderclap rang out, and the crystalline screen was pulverized into powder amid a crisp crack by the golden lightning. He really did discover the all-encompassing plate. If we can't ambush him, then we'll just have to forcibly stop him, sacred ancestor Shui Guang said in a cold voice. The other two clones naturally offered no objections, and both of them began to make hand seals while uttering incantations. At the same time, the ball of lightning transformed into a giant net that swept forward, and a white object appeared out of thin air. This was a circular object that was over 1,000 feet in size, and it resembled a massive jade plate. Under the illumination of the white light emanating from the jade plate, a formation that was around 500 meters in size also emerged. If Han Li hadn't stopped right as he did, he would have plunged headfirst into that restriction, and that was naturally quite an alarming realization for him. The giant jade plate revolved on the spot, then released a dense white light barrier. After just a few flashes, the light barrier transformed into a wall of light with no end in sight to completely cut off Han Li. However, a burst of exuberant light suddenly flashed from Han Li's body, and he transformed into another giant bird form that resembled the legendary true spirit Heavenly Phoenix. This was none other than the Heavenly Phoenix transformation of Han Li's 12 awakening transformations. As soon as this bird emerged, it let loose a clear cry before flapping its wings, and spatial fluctuations erupted up ahead, following which a white spatial rift emerged. Han Li's giant bird body flashed forward, and he instantly vanished into the rift. In the next instant, an identical rift appeared beyond the white light barrier, and Han Li re-emerged in a wraith-like manner before immediately adopting his Kunping form again. He flapped his four wings, and a resounding thunderclap rang out as he disappeared on the spot. Several thousand feet away, another thunderclap rang out, and Han Li reappeared before continuing to fly away as an azure and white thread of light. This process sounded like quite a lengthy and convoluted one, but it had actually only taken an instant, and before the three clones knew it, Han Li was fleeing into the distance again. The three clones were naturally completely flabbergasted upon seeing this. That's impossible. How was he able to teleport away so easily in the face of the restriction from the all-encompassing plate? Could it be that he's carrying some type of treasure that can counter the all-encompassing plate? One of the clones roared in a furious manner. No, it was because of his transformation. Don't forget that the all-encompassing plate is unable to restrict spirit birds with innate spatial abilities such as phoenixes. What that brat just unleashed was clearly some type of Heavenly Phoenix transformation technique, Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang analyzed in a calm voice. Just how many transformations does this brat have? Even with Yuan Cha's assistance, it won't be an easy task to capture him, the final clone said with a dark expression. Right at this moment, white light flashed from the distance, and a majestic stone hall appeared before hurtling directly toward the three clones. Let's set all that aside and give chase first, Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang said without any hesitation. Indeed, we can't let him get away again. Otherwise we may not get a chance to capture him again. The other two clones also nodded in agreement. Thus, crimson light flashed from their bodies, and they instantly combined as one before injecting their power into the giant jade plate in a frenzy. A faint buzzing sound rang out from the jade plate, and runes swirled over its surface before it shot forth as a ball of white light. Close to 10 kilometers away, Yuan Cha was appraising everything that was unfolding while seated in her stone chair with a dark expression. What useless idiots! I can't believe those three clones couldn't stop that Han brat even after setting up an ambush. It appears I'll have to do everything myself, Yuan Chua grumbled to herself. Meanwhile, Han Li was also internally lamenting his current situation. Even though the enemies within the jade plate hadn't revealed themselves, he was able to identify who they were from the faint crimson light that had appeared when the treasure had been activated. Now that he was being pursued by two sacred ancestors at once, Han Li had naturally completely cast aside all thoughts of turning around and facing his pursuers in battle, and was focused wholeheartedly on fleeing. 2 days later, Han Li found himself surrounded by several tens of mid-grade devilish beings. These devilish beings were expelling devilish chi out of their mouths and swinging their weapons through the air, unleashing barrages of attacks toward Han Li with all their might. However, Han Li merely released a layer of golden lightning arcs out of his body, and all of the devilish beings were reduced to dust amid a resounding thunderclap. After that, he immediately continued on his way, not daring to delay even for an instant. A short while later, the jade plate and stone hall also rapidly passed through this place. 5 days later, over 100 devilish beings and over 1,000 low-grade devilish beasts appeared before Han Li. On this occasion, Han Li plunged headfirst into the horde of beasts, and streaks of azure sword chi erupted out of his body in a frenzy. All of the low-grade devilish beasts and devilish beings were instantly destroyed while Han Li continued to flee rapidly into the distance. At this point, the jade plate and stone hall were already close to 1,000 kilometers away. 10 days later, in the air above a murky gray mountain range, a giant golden ape that was over 1,000 feet tall rushed into an army comprised of hundreds of elite devilish beings and a dozen or so giant devilish beasts. The giant ape swung its massive arms violently through the air, and none of the devilish beings or giant devilish beasts were able to withstand even a single attack. However, they seemed to have received some kind of strict order. Even though their numbers were quickly dwindling, they were still throwing themselves at the giant ape with no regard for their own lives. A buzzing sound rang out from another direction, and two balls of white light emerged almost in unison before hurtling toward the battlefield. The giant golden ape let loose a roar of fury before unleashing a burst of golden sound waves that made the nearby space twist and warp violently. In the blink of an eye, all of the devilish beings swept up by the golden sound waves self-detonated on the spot, following which the giant ape transformed into a four-winged Kuan Peng again before flying away. Half a month later, Han Li had reverted back to his human form, and he was situated on the lakebed of an unknown lake, appraising the two devilish lords before him with a grim expression. One of the devilish lords had an inky black head, webbed hands, and several thick tentacles beneath its armpits that were waving incessantly. As for the other devilish lord, it had a pair of eyes that were as bright as lamps and a layer of shimmering azure scales all over its body. Han Li took a deep breath before making a grabbing motion with both hands, summoning an azure and a black mountain before sending both of them hurtling directly toward the two devilish lords. In the air above the lake close to 10,000 kilometers away, the jade plate and stone hall were hurtling toward Han Li's location one after the other. 2 months later, the four-winged Kuan Peng was being harassed by a dozen or so shimmering crimson devilish beings above a peculiar steaming swamp. Regardless of whether the giant Kuan Peng unleashed bolts of silver lightning or lashed out with its talons, the crimson devilish beings were able to instantly regenerate before pouncing toward the giant bird again. High up in the air around 1,000 kilometers away, the jade plate and stone hall reappeared. Han Li could naturally sense that his pursuers were closing in once again, and he immediately released countless golden flowers from his giant bird body. Each flower was around the size of a bowl, and they each contained a shimmering golden beetle. These were none other than the mature gold-devouring beetles that Han Li had kept in reserve, and he had released several thousand of them at once. Even with their instantaneous regenerative abilities, the crimson devilish beings were still completely devoured by the gold-devouring beetles within the span of just a few breaths, leaving behind no trace of their existence. Han Li let loose a long cry, and all of the beetles flew back toward him. Immediately thereafter, he flapped his 4 wings and vanished on the spot as a silver arc of lightning. After a few more rumbling thunderclaps, the silver arc of lightning flashed a few times before completely vanishing into the distance. Around 10 minutes later, the jade plate and stone hall both arrived on the scene before stopping in mid-air. A humanoid figure then emerged above each treasure. One of them was a slender and elegant woman, while the other was a crimson-robed young man. They were none other than the clones of Yuan Cha and Shui Guang. Yuan Cha was completely expressionless, but the fury in her eyes was plain to see, while Shui Guang wore an expression of unbridled rage. I didn't think that even my blood-like crystal guards wouldn't be able to stall him at all. It looks like he's intent on dragging out this chase, Shui Guang spat through gritted teeth. Humph, aren't those guards of yours supposed to be indestructible? How were they killed by those mere spirit insects? Yuan Cha harumphed coldly in response. Don't tell me you didn't identify what those spirit insects were. My guards have indeed cultivated the blood-body devilish art, but there's no way they could withstand the power of those spirit insects, Shui Guang snapped. Of course I was able to identify those spirit insects. Perhaps I would be wary of them if there were over 100,000 of those gold-devouring beetles, but such a trifling number won't be anywhere near enough to pose a threat to you and me. We can just trap them using a wood or stone attribute treasure, Yuan Cha said in an indifferent manner. I do indeed have a pair of treasures of those attributes, but can you be certain that he only has that many of those spirit insects? What if he has more than 100,000 of them up his sleeve? On top of that, we still don't know how many trump cards he's yet to reveal. What if we back him into a corner and he lashes out to deal us severe damage before we take him down? Shui Guang speculated. You think he has over 100 gold-devouring beetles? You sure have a vivid imagination. Alright, let's say that he does indeed have that many gold-devouring beetles up his sleeve. Do you think his spiritual sense will be powerful enough to control them? Even if our true bodies were present, controlling over 100,000 gold-devouring beetles would instantly exhaust our spiritual sense. Rest assured, controlling several thousand of those beetles at once is most likely already his limit. If he really could control so many of those beetles at once, he would have used them against us already. He does indeed possess some powerful abilities that we need to be wary of, but don't tell me that you're planning to give up now. If so, then I'll just have to continue on my own. You just have to deploy your subordinates to cut off all of the potential routes he can take to return to any major human settlements, Yuan Cha chuckled coldly. Sacred Ancestor Shui Guang's expression changed slightly before he replied, I was only considering the worst-case scenario. Seeing as you're so confident, I'll naturally be willing to continue as well. Han Li had taken 2 extremely important treasures from him, so he naturally wasn't willing to give up on this chase. As you know, I'm the leader of our holy race army in this area, but I can't deploy all of the troops here to hunt down that human brat. Otherwise, if something were to go wrong, I would be held accountable, Shui Guang suddenly said. So, what are you trying to say? Spit it out, Yuan Cha urged in an impatient manner. What I'm saying is that seeing as we're unable to capture this human cultivator in a short time, you and I have to make some long-term plans. Why don't you request some reinforcements from Lu Ji? If she can deploy some of her elite subordinates to assist us, there's no way that human brat will be able to get away. With your relationship with Lu Ji, I'm sure this won't be too difficult, Shui Guang chuckled. Yuan Cha considered this proposal for a moment before nodding in agreement. Request reinforcements from Lu Ji? That's not a bad idea. Alright, I can do that, but during this time, you and your subordinates have to keep up the pressure on that Han brat. Don't allow him any respite and certainly don't let him get away. Rest assured, fellow Taoist Yuan Cha, I'll be sure to cut off all of the potential routes leading to Deep Heaven City and the other major human settlements. I'll ensure that he'll have no one to turn to, Shui Guang assured in an ecstatic manner. That would be best. Prior to the arrival of Lu Ji's reinforcements, we should continue to follow him from a distance. Once we completely exhaust him, we'll be able to capture him with ease, Yuan Cha said in a cold voice. Of course. In reality, with our powers, if we were prepared to incur some costs, we would have most likely already chased him down, Shui Guang said with a smile. Alright, let's continue then. I have to admit that his speed truly is quite remarkable. If we delay here any longer, he'll escape out of our sensory range, Yuan Cha said as she cast her gaze into the distance. Of course. I've already set up 7 more groups of my subordinates up ahead, and they should be able to exhaust him even further, Shui Guang replied with a cold smile. Yuan Cha offered no response to this and merely returned to her stone hall as a ball of white light. As for Shui Guang, he made a hand seal and vanished into the jade plate as a cloud of black qi. In the next instant, both of the giant treasures set off in pursuit of Han Li once again. Meanwhile, Han Li was around 10,000 kilometers away, flying through the air with a dark expression. Having been fleeing for the past 2 months, the plans of the 2 sacred ancestors had naturally been made very apparent to him. During this period of time, he had encountered at least 30 to 40 groups of enemies. Some of these groups were comprised only of low-grade devilish beings, while others included the most elite forces the devilish army had to offer, and there were even 2 groups that had devilish lords among their ranks. Under normal circumstances, this naturally wouldn't be of any concern to him, but with the 2 sacred ancestors hot on his heels, he didn't dare to engage in prolonged battles. As such, he was forced to unleash powerful abilities to eradicate his enemies as quickly as possible, but doing so was naturally very taxing on his magic power and spiritual sense. If it weren't for the fact that he had many regenerative pills up his sleeve, he would have already collapsed. Even so, he was still in terrible condition. Following the intense battles that he had endured, his magic power reserves had been whittled down to less than half, and after being forced to release all those mature gold-devouring beetles, his spiritual sense had also been severely depleted. The only silver lining on this situation was that the 2 sacred ancestors seemed to have been intimidated by the powers he had displayed, and they only dared to deploy their troops to try and stall him. As such, he didn't have to worry about being attacked by the 2 sacred ancestors for now, but he clearly couldn't keep this up for much longer. If they were to discover that he was virtually a spent force, or if they were to deploy a large number of devilish beings to surround him, then he would be as good as dead. Han Li naturally wasn't going to wait for something like this to happen. He had employed all types of methods to try and shake off his pursuers, but the 2 sacred ancestors were just as if not more adept than he was in tracking and concealment abilities. He had tried a wide variety of tactics, but at the very most, he had only been able to shake off the 2 sacred ancestors for less than half a day before they caught up again. Thus, Han Li was in a very dire situation. If there were only a single sacred ancestor pursuing him, then perhaps he could slip away by taking advantage of a moment of complacency or a lapse in concentration from his pursuer. However, with 2 of them complementing one another, there was no way he would be able to depend on something like that. As he approached Deep Heaven City, the number of enemies that he encountered was clearly beginning to increase. He couldn't allow this to continue any longer. His pursuers were clearly taking advantage of his intention to return to Deep Heaven City, and had most likely set up a vast devilish army to stop him along the way. If he were to forge ahead blindly, then he'd run out of magic power and be killed before he could reach Deep Heaven City. He had to escape toward another direction. There were definitely going to be devilish beings attempting to impede him in other directions as well, but the resistance he encountered would most likely be significantly diminished. However, he couldn't make his intentions too obvious. He had to somehow shake off his pursuers for now and give himself an opening for some respite. Having made up his mind, Han Li immediately began to think of a plan. Perhaps the dire nature of the situation bestowed upon Han Li a greater sense of urgency, but he was quickly able to think of a plan. Within the jade plate, the 3 Shui Guang clones were standing in front of a new crystalline wall in a stationary manner. 2 of the clones had already closed their eyes, seemingly to rest, while the third was staring intently at the image on the wall. All of a sudden, a faint cry of surprise escaped from the third clone's mouth, and the other 2 clones immediately opened their eyes. The image on the crystalline wall depicted Han Li in his Kunping form, and he suddenly reverted back into human form, then stopped before making a hand seal. His body blurred slightly and he manifested 8 identical figures to himself. The Han Lis then all fled toward different directions at once. Humph, does he think that such a pitiful little trick will work on me? One of the clones harumphed coldly before making a hand seal, and a giant devilish projection appeared behind him amid a flash of gray light. The devilish projection had a pair of horns on its head and several massive tentacles on its back. It let loose a menacing snarl before a giant vertical eye suddenly appeared on its chest amid a flash of crimson light. The eye took up close to half of the entire area of its chest, and it was glowing with green light, presenting a harrowing sight to behold. The clone let loose a loud cry, and a burst of green light erupted from the giant eye before vanishing into the crystalline wall in a flash. In the next instant, the clone closed his eyes, and azure light began to flash incessantly over his face. After a short while he said in a confident voice, "There are 2 actual bodies and 6 projections. One of them must be a clone, and it's traveling in a different direction from his true body. Looks like he's realized our intentions and is trying to shake us off again. Speed up. Don't let him get away," another clone said in a cold voice. Of course. However, just as the other clone was about to say something further, spiritual light suddenly flashed from the crystalline screen, and the image changed into one of Yuan Cha sitting on her stone chair. "There are 2 actual bodies, we'll take one each. If either of us find his true body, then notify the other right away," Yuan Cha instructed as soon as her image appeared. "All right, we'll do as you say," one of the Shui Guang clones immediately agreed. Yuan Cha nodded before sweeping a sleeve through the air, and the image on the crystalline wall instantly faded. Almost at the exact same moment, countless runes surged out of the stone hall in a frenzy before forming a giant teleportation formation down below. The stone hall rotated at the center of the formation before disappearing in a flash. "Let's go," one of the Shui Guang clones said. The 3 clones then made hand seals in unison, and bright crimson light radiated from their bodies. In the next instant, the giant jade plate released a burst of dazzling white light, and its speed increased by more than 2-fold. Meanwhile, the Han Lis all fled in different directions, vanishing into the distance in a flash. Several 100,000 kilometers away, there was an army of over 1,000 elite devilish beings hiding in preparation for an ambush. Moments later, the army received an order, and they immediately split up into the 2 before rushing away in 2 different directions. As for the place that Han Li was situated at mere moments ago, none of the devilish beings took any further interest in it. Around 10 minutes later, a ball of purple light suddenly flashed from behind a mundane-looking azure rock on the ground below, and a silver humanoid figure abruptly emerged. It was another Han Li. This Han Li was giving off no aura whatsoever, and as soon as he appeared, he closed his eyes before releasing his spiritual sense. After verifying that there weren't any devilish lords in a radius of several thousand kilometers, a hint of elation appeared on his face. He immediately flipped a hand over to produce a thin skin-like object, which he tossed onto his own body. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a nondescript giant gray wolf, and he shot forth directly toward Deep Heaven City again as a streak of faint gray light. Meanwhile, another Han Li was flying through the air over a lush forest as a streak of azure light. A stone hall was hot on his heels in pursuit only around several kilometers away. A massive mountain that was over 100,000 feet tall suddenly appeared in Han Li's field of view. The mountain was extremely lush and scenic, and Han Li's eyes immediately lit up as he flew directly toward the mountain. After just a few flashes, he abruptly vanished at a certain point halfway up the mountain. Not long thereafter, the stone hall appeared above the mountain summit, then released countless runes of different colors to instantly manifest a giant 5-colored light formation. The formation expelled a faint buzzing sound as soon as it appeared, and a giant ball of 5-colored light with a diameter of several hundred feet appeared at its center. A cold harumph rang out from within the stone palace, and the giant ball of light immediately detached itself from the light formation before descending toward the highest point on the mountain peak. 5-colored spiritual light flashed violently, and in the instant the ball of light came into contact with the mountain summit, it disappeared into the mountain without a sound, leaving only a gigantic black hole on the ground. Not only was the hole extremely massive with a radius of over 1,000 feet, its edge was completely black and remarkably smooth, and a scorching aura was emanating from within it. After the span of just a few breaths, an earth-shattering boom erupted from deep within the belly of the mountain, and the earth tremored violently. Countless thick pillars of light then suddenly erupted from the surface of the mountain, punching countless holes into it in an instant. The mountain swayed violently for a moment before completely collapsing, crumbling into a massive pile of rubble with countless rocks and stones flying in all directions. At the center of the wreckage was a gargantuan crater that was several hundred feet deep with an area of over 10 acres. The center of the crater was completely devoid of all matter, as if everything within it had been vaporized on the spot. Immediately thereafter, over 100 thick pillars of light erupted from the light formation up above, then pierced into the wreckage down below. A string of resounding booms rang out from underground, but there was nothing amiss. Only then did the stone hall gradually descend from above, only stopping once it was only several thousand feet above the rubble. White light flashed in the air above the stone hall, and Yuan Cha emerged with a slightly bewildered expression as she swept her gaze over the wreckage. That Han brat just escaped into this mountain, so there's no way he should have been able to escape the scope of my attack. However, it looks like that was only a clone of his, seeing as I was able to kill him so easily, but even if it's just a clone, it should have left behind some remains. Could it be that it just so happened to be at the epicenter of the attack, and its body was completely destroyed? Yuan Cha murmured to herself with furrowed brows. After a brief pause for contemplation, she closed her eyes while pointing a finger at her own glabella. A burst of enormous spiritual sense immediately erupted forth before spreading in all directions before scouring meticulously through every single inch of rubble, but all to no avail. Looks like I was overthinking things. Yuan Cha's expression eased slightly as she reopened her eyes. Right at this moment, a peculiar type of fluctuations emanated from her body, and her expression changed slightly as she swept a sleeve through the air to release an antiquated mirror. The mirror circled around in the air above her head before hovering in front of her, and moments later, the image of Shui Guang appeared on its surface. Fellow Taoist Yuan Cha, there's no need for you to continue in your pursuit. You're most likely chasing after a clone. The one that I'm chasing has killed most of the troops I sent to impede him, and he's displaying immense power. I'm confident that this is his true body. I've managed to trap him in a certain place with my all-encompassing plate, but he's unleashed some type of concealment technique, and I'm unable to find him for now. The three of us need to focus on controlling the all-encompassing plate to seal off the surrounding area, so you'll have to assist us with tracking him down, the Shui Guang clone said in a serious manner. The remnants of Yuan Cha's suspicions were erased upon hearing this, and she replied, I see, that confirms it then. I've already taken care of the one that I'm chasing after, and it did indeed seem far too weak to be the true body. I'll come to you right away, make sure you don't allow him to escape. She then immediately stowed her mirror away before flying upward as a streak of white light. After just a few flashes, she returned to her stone hall and departed from the scene. Thus, peace and quiet returned to the area. 4 hours later, a layer of green light suddenly flashed over a mundane-looking dead log situated in a certain corner of the rubble. The log suddenly transformed into a green-skinned young man who was identical to Han Li in appearance. It was none other than Han Li's spirit body. As soon the spirit body emerged, it immediately laid a hand onto the top of its own head, and a ball of green light emerged, within which was an adorable little girl. The little girl's face was slightly pale, and she took a seat with her legs crossed in the air above the spirit body. After a long while, a hint of color had finally returned to her cheeks. She cast her gaze toward the massive crater nearby with a hint of lingering fear in her eyes, and murmured to herself, Master was right, the spirit body really is able to conceal itself flawlessly within a natural setting. I've completed my mission, now it's time to hide somewhere, then find a way to reunite with Master later. I hope Master can survive this ordeal. After that, she disappeared into the spirit body again as a ball of green light. In the next instant, the spirit body reopened its eyes, then decided on a certain direction before flying away. Elsewhere, there were over 100 devilish elites hovering in the air around a giant jade plate. They were situated above a valley, and were looking down below with solemn looks in their eyes. At this point, the giant jade plate had already transformed into a scintillating red sun, and the red spiritual light radiating from it had encompassed the entire valley down below. Within this red light, there were countless silver runes flashing incessantly, and they seemed to contain some type of mysterious power. Within the jade plate, the 3 Shui Guang clones were standing next to one another. They were all making hand seals with crimson light shimmering around their bodies, staring at the crystalline wall up ahead with intense unblinking eyes. Within the image on the crystalline wall, a series of crimson balls of light were scouring through the valley in search for something, and nothing was able to impede these balls of light. As the balls of light roamed over the landscape, the image on the crystalline wall was constantly changing. However, there was nothing to be seen aside from rocks, trees, and spirit beasts that possessed no intelligence. The 3 clones' expressions naturally darkened even further upon seeing this, and they continued to control the balls of light to search through the area. Not long after that, a ball of white light shot forth from the distance, and it was none other than Yuan Cha's stone hall. The stone hall reached the jade plate in a flash before stopping on the spot, and almost at the exact same moment, Yuan Cha emerged from the stone hall amid a flash of white light. You've finally arrived, fellow Taoist Yuan Cha, the Shui Guang clone at the center said with a smile. Cut the chit-chat, Are you sure that Han Brat has been trapped in the valley? Yuan Cha asked. Of course I wouldn't dare to lie to you about something like this. After I caught up to him, he tried to use an earth movement technique to get away, so I sealed off this entire area with my all-encompassing plate. There's no way he can escape from here, but he's used some type of concealment technique that's managed to escape my detection, so I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist, another Shui Guang clone replied. Alright, I'll unleash my great origin devil technique right away to force him out into the open, Yuan Cha said with a nod. Please allow one of us to enter the valley with you to protect you against potential sneak attacks while you unleash your ability, the final Shui Guang clone said in a cold voice. Protect me? It sounds like you just want to keep an eye on me. Yuan Cha's expression darkened upon hearing this. You're misconstruing my intentions, fellow Taoist Yuan Cha. That human brat is full of tricks, and he's carrying several powerful treasures that could potentially be very dangerous, the Shui Guang clone in the middle chuckled in response. Do whatever you want then. I won't stop you from sending someone to accompany me, but you'd better not try anything. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, don't blame me for turning on you, Yuan Cha said in an expressionless manner. Immediately thereafter, she returned to her stone hall without waiting for a response from Shui Guang. The smile on the face of the middle Shui Guang clone immediately faded, and he said to another clone, Alright, just as we planned earlier, you go and keep an eye on her. If she tracks down that brat, notify us right away. We can't allow her to get her hands on him first. Rest assured, I'll be sure to keep a close eye on her. That brat is most likely a spent force by now, but Yuan Cha still definitely won't be able to capture him easily. Before he appears, make sure to maintain the all-encompassing plate restriction so he doesn't get away again, the clone replied. The other two clones naturally gave an affirmative response. Meanwhile, a rumbling boom suddenly rang out from the stone hall, and countless runes flashed from its surface as it split up into the two stone giants. Yuan Cha was standing atop the head of one of the giants, and she made a hand seal, upon which the two stone giants descended toward the center of the valley. At the same time, a ball of crimson light emerged from the jade plate before also flying downward. Moments later, both Yuan Cha and one of the Shui Guang clones had landed on a patch of flat ground within the valley. Yuan Chu inspected her surroundings before issuing an instruction to the two stone giants. Elders, begin your transformation. Yes, Mistress Yuan Cha. The two stone giants immediately replied. Bright gray light erupted from their bodies, and they instantly transformed into a pair of stone pillars, each of which was over 1,000 feet tall. There was a series of strange patterns and runes engraved on the surfaces of the two pillars, creating quite a mysterious sight to behold. Shiluan totems. I'm very impressed that these two subordinates of yours managed to cultivate such an ability, the Shui Guang clone said in an intrigued voice. These two are definitely among the top 10, if not the top 3 most powerful beings in the Stone Devil race. If they can't even do something like this, then why would I have protected them in our holy realm for so many years? Yuan Cha replied in a cold voice. If the Stone Devils under my command were this powerful, I'd also do everything in my power to protect them. Alright, setting that aside for now, have you summoned these totems to enhance the power of your great origin devil technique? The Shui Guang clone asked. Even your all-encompassing plate was unable to track down that Han brat, so just using the great origin devil technique may not be enough either. However, with the Shiluan totems to assist me, I'll be able to find him for sure, Yuan Cha confirmed. The Shui Guang clone nodded in response before falling silent. Yuan Cha also had no intention of speaking any further, and her body swayed before she appeared in between the two stone pillars. White light flashed, and an antiquated stone platform rose up from the ground, carrying her over 100 feet up into the air. She took a deep breath before making a hand seal, then swept her other sleeve through the air to release a dozen or so small black flags, all of which took root firmly on the ground near the stone platform. She then let loose a delicate cry, and a streak of black light emerged from her back before transforming into a giant devilish projection with 3 heads and 6 arms. The projection wore a suit of glossy black armor, and its entire body was giving off an overwhelming baleful aura. Its 6 eyes were bright red and completely devoid of emotion. Yuan Cha began to chant in a low voice before casting around a dozen incantation seals into her surroundings, all of which vanished into thin air in a flash. The small black flags immediately released a buzzing sound in response, and they quickly swelled to over 100 feet tall amid a flash of black light. Right at this moment, the giant devilish projection behind Yuan Cha suddenly raised its heads before making a grabbing motion upward with all 6 of its hands. 6 black balls of light emerged over its palms, then transformed into 6 plumes of black smoke that converged high up in the air. A devilish cloud instantly took shape up above, then began to take on the forms of different living creatures, as if it possessed spiritual nature. Yuan Cha's chanting ceased upon seeing this, and she pointed a finger up toward the huge flags. Black light swirled over the surfaces of the flags, then transformed into around a dozen bursts of black chi that rose up into the devilish cloud. As a result, the cloud swelled drastically in size and soon, it had encompassed virtually half of the entire valley. A cold light flashed through Yuan Cha's eyes, and she abruptly opened her mouth before expelling several balls of blood essence toward the devilish cloud up above. The blood essence transformed into droplets of blood rain that vanished into the cloud in a flash, and at the same time, the 2 stone pillars were also releasing halos of 5-colored light. With each halo that passed through the devilish cloud, the cloud would swell slightly in size, and not long after that, countless crimson threads emerged within it amid a flash of crimson light. They intertwined with the black cloud and manifested countless fist-sized balls of black chi, all of which then transformed into palm-sized black crows. There were over 10,000 of these crows in total, creating a harrowing sight to behold. "Go!" Yuan Cha instructed as she swept a sleeve through the air. The crows circled around before flying toward a certain direction in the valley, while Yuan Cha closed her eyes before pressing a finger against her own glabella, seemingly sensing something in silence. The Shui Guang clone's expression changed slightly at the sight of the massive murder of crows, but he didn't do anything. The crows seemed to possess insubstantial bodies as they were able to pass through all physical obstacles in their way, and mere moments later, they had scoured through close to half of the entire valley, but still hadn't been able to discover anything. Just as the crows were summoned back by Yuan Cha before being sent toward a different direction, a sharp ringing sound suddenly erupted, and the Shui Guang clone faltered slightly before hurriedly laying a hand onto his own waist. An egg-sized crystal ball instantly shot forth before transforming into a translucent light screen, within which the other 2 Shui Guang clones could be seen. "We've got bad news. Come back with fellow Taoist Yuan Cha right away. Another Han Li has suddenly been sighted elsewhere, and he broke through several of our defensive lines, killing 2 devilish lords en route to Deep Heaven City. That Han Li used an incomplete profound heavenly treasure and released a swarm of gold-devouring beetles, so he's almost definitely the true body. We've all been had, we're currently pursuing just another clone of his. I've already issued an order to stall him at all costs. If we hurry over now we should still be able to catch him," one of the 2 Shui Guang clones said in an urgent manner. The Shui Guang clone's expression darkened significantly upon hearing this, and he hurriedly turned to Yuan Cha. "Did you hear that, fellow Taoist Yuan Cha? Forget about this clone, we have to leave this place right away." Yuan Cha's eyelids fluttered, and she suddenly reopened her eyes, revealing them to be flashing with green light. "Humph, how can you be sure that you haven't gotten the wrong target again? I've already gone through this much hassle and I'm on the brink of success. Even if this isn't his true body, it'll still be useful for me to capture it. If you can't wait then you can go on ahead. After I capture this clone I'll meet up with you," she said in a cold voice. The Shui Guang clone was rather taken aback to hear this, and after a brief moment of contemplation he said, "In that case I'll be going on ahead. With your powers, I'm sure you'll have no issues capturing a mere clone. However, his true body is very troublesome to deal with, and you and I will have to join forces to take him down, so don't get any other ideas. Rest assured, I won't intentionally ruin something that's mutually beneficial to us. I'm pursuing this clone for my own purpose. As for what that is, perhaps you'll learn of it soon," Yuan Cha replied in a nonchalant manner. The Shui Guang clone was still rather befuddled, but it wasn't appropriate for him to pry any further, so he could only set the matter aside for now. "I'll be leaving behind half of my subordinates for you to use as you see fit. There aren't that many of them, but I'm sure they'll be of some help to you." "Thank you for that," Yuan Cha replied with a nod as her expression eased slightly. Immediately thereafter, the Shui Guang clone rose up into the air as a streak of crimson light, then disappeared into the jade plate after just a few flashes. Moments later, a film of crimson light appeared over the surface of the jade plate, and it abruptly vanished on the spot. Half of the elite devilish beings gathered around the jade plate also disappeared, leaving over 100 devilish beings behind. They were led by a late spatial tempering stage devilish being, and they all descended toward Yuan Cha. The leader of the devilish beings strode forward before extending a deep bow. "Mistress Yuan Cha, Master Shui Guang has already departed. Do you have any orders for us? Even though he was a subordinate to Shui Guang, this devilish being was acting in an extremely respectful manner toward Yuan Cha. No, just stand by for now, Yuan Cha instructed in an indifferent manner. Yes, mistress. The devilish being naturally accepted the order without any objections. Thus, the devilish beings all scattered around the stone platform to await further instructions. As for Yuan Cha, she slowly closed her eyes again, and not long after that, the murder of crows scoured completed their search through another corner of the valley, then continued on toward another area. Not long after that they finally discovered something. Just as the crows were flying over a short shrub, over 100 of them suddenly began to circle around the plant while squawking loudly. Yuan Cha abruptly reopened her eyes, and an elated look appeared on her face as she shot forth toward the shrub as a streak of white light. At her speed, it would only take a few flashes for her to reach her destination, and right at this moment the space around the shrub warped slightly. Immediately thereafter, a burst of faint black chi emerged before flying away, but it was clearly already too late. Yuan Cha pointed a finger toward the black shadow, and all of the nearby crows immediately began to squawk in an extremely unpleasant manner while flying toward the black shadow like moths to a flame. Perhaps one or two of these crows wouldn't be of any concern, but with over 1,000 of them swooping down at once, the black shadow was forced to stop and reveal its original form. This was an inky black nascent soul with an identical appearance to Han Li, and its entire body was radiating dense devilish chi. This was none other than Han Li's second nascent soul. This second nascent soul wasn't as powerful as Han Li's main nascent soul, but following that ordeal in the vast glacial realm, it had reached the peak of the spatial tempering stage, and it possessed immensely powerful devil Dao cultivation arts. Even though it had been forced to stop by the oncoming murder of crows, it didn't panic in the slightest as it rubbed its hand together before raising both of them in unison. Fierce black winds were swept up, and two bursts of inky black devilish chi erupted from within, transforming into a pair of black pythons that pounced straight into the murder of crows. The two pythons surged through the air, and all of the crows in their path were instantly destroyed. Even though the pair of pythons had gained the upper hand, the second nascent soul showed no signs of stopping as it quickly made a few more hand seals. Right at this moment, spiritual light flashed up above, and Yuan Cha emerged before immediately reaching down with one of her slender hands before making a grabbing motion. A resounding boom rang out as a giant white hand appeared out of thin air, then spread its fingers before pressing downward. With her enormous powers, if the hand were allowed to descend, there was no way that the second nascent soul would be able to escape. Thankfully, it was already prepared for this scenario and had a life-saving ability up its sleeve. All of a sudden, the nascent soul exploded and a dozen or so inky black fireballs shot forth. Each fireball was around the size of an egg, and they instantly transformed into an inky black nascent soul each before appearing several hundred feet away. You still think you can get away? Yuan Cha raised her eyebrows and let loose a delicate cry before uttering a peculiar incantation. All of a sudden, a layer of translucent light appeared over the giant white hand, and it instantly exploded into a massive ball of white light. Countless streaks of crystalline light shot forth from the ball of light, encompassing an area over 1,000 feet in size, as well as all of the black nascent souls. Just as the nascent souls were about to unleash movement techniques to flee the scene, the streaks of crystalline light pierced through their bodies, and all of them exploded into balls of black flames aside from a single nascent soul, which twisted around to evade the oncoming attacks. The only remaining nascent soul was the real one, and its expression changed slightly upon seeing its illusionary technique being broken. Immediately thereafter, it expelled several balls of blood essence out of its mouth, then made a hand seal before chanting something. The blood essence dispersed into a cloud of blood mist, which completely inundated its body. What trick are you trying now? Yuan Cha harumphed coldly as she swept a sleeve toward the cloud of blood mist. A piece of black fabric shot forth out of her sleeve in a flash, then instantly sliced through the blood mist like a projection. However, almost at the exact same moment, a streak of crimson light also emerged from the blood mist before flying away into the distance. In the next instant, crimson light flashed in the distant sky as a crimson thread appeared, then blurred before vanishing again. Yuan Cha faltered slightly upon seeing this before a frosty look reappeared on her face. That's the blood shadow evasion technique. That is indeed rather troublesome to deal with, but that won't be enough for you to escape from me. She waved a hand toward the distance, and the two giant stone pillars tremored slightly before rising up into the air. They then combined as one to form the stone hall again before hurtling directly toward Yuan Cha. Yuan Cha flew into the stone hall before issuing an instruction to the devilish beings down below, then flew away as a ball of white light. The devilish beings down below naturally hurriedly followed along, and thus the area was vacated in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, in the air above a lake that was countless kilometers away from the second nascent soul, Han Li had unleashed his sword art to create a giant azure dragon comprised of countless streaks of sword chi. The azure dragon was pouncing toward a high-grade devilish being with an insect-like body, and the devilish being was instantly torn apart. Even its nascent soul was instantly destroyed before it could escape. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air, and the azure dragon disintegrated into countless streaks of azure sword chi again. The sword chi revolved around in mid-air before hurtling back toward Han Li, then vanished into his body amid a flash of azure light. Beside the body of the high-grade devilish being that had just been slain, there were also a dozen or so other bodies of high-grade devilish beings hovering nearby. After stowing away all of the sword chi back into his own body, Han Li's face paled significantly, and only after circulating his magic power through his meridians a few times did his complexion improve slightly. It looks like they've already figured it out, so I can't keep going in this direction. What a pity. If they had reacted any slower than this, then there really was a chance that I could have made it back to Deep Heaven City. I can't allow myself to become predictable, so I'll have to try my luck by going in another direction. It's a good thing that my pursuers have already been shaken off, so there's a good chance that I'll be able to escape, Han Li mused to himself. Back when Han Li had unleashed that secret technique to conjure up projections of himself, Shu'er and his second nascent soul had been among the projections, and they had lured away the two sacred ancestors. Meanwhile, he had concealed himself using his high zenith invisibility talisman and remained at the same location. With his drastic increase in cultivation base, it was impossible for the high zenith invisibility talisman to maintain its concealment effect for too long. If Yuan Cha and Shui Guang had merely remained on the spot for a while, he would have been forced to reveal himself, and that was why he hadn't used his talisman earlier during his escape. He had already taken a huge risk to send out his spirit body and second nascent soul in a last-ditch effort, so he had naturally decided to use this talisman as well. As expected, Shui Guang wasn't able to see through his deception in time, and he was able to shake off his pursuers. Not only was he taking a risk by doing this, his spirit body and second nascent soul were in even more peril than he was. Thankfully, the spirit body was formed by the immortal Zoisha, and Shu'er was also a spirit being of heaven and earth, so as long as they had enough time to conceal themselves, they should be able to remain hidden. As for his second nascent soul, he had given it his other high zenith invisibility talisman. On top of that, the second nascent soul had cultivated a Devil Dao secret technique that allowed it to manifest wings with its devilish chi, and it had also cultivated the blood shadow evasion technique. With those two techniques up its sleeve, it wasn't completely implausible that the second nascent soul could escape. After all, once the two sacred ancestors realized the second nascent soul wasn't his true body, they'd most likely just abandon it. This was why he had immediately exposed himself and began slaying devilish beings when he felt the timing to be about right. News of his exploits had most likely already reached Shui Guang and Yuan Cha, and he didn't want to be pursued by them again, so he had no choice but to truly abandon Deep Heaven City and go elsewhere. With that in mind, Han Li no longer hesitated and fled in another direction. During the next 2 months, Han Li began to dart around all over the place in an extremely unpredictable manner. Initially, the Shui Guang clones were unable to track him down, and could only react to reports from other devilish beings that had sighted Han Li. As such, they were always a step too late, and by the time they arrived, Han Li would already be gone. Strangely enough, Yuan Cha wasn't with them and Han Li had no idea where she was. He was naturally more than happy to see this, and if it weren't for the fact that he was sorely lacking in magic power, he would have been very tempted to turn around and retaliate against the Shui Guang clones. Unfortunately, under these current circumstances, he could only continue to run for his life. The 3 Shui Guang clones were becoming more and more frustrated from this fruitless chase, and they dedicated even more devilish troops to hunting Han Li down, spreading them far and wide to try and intercept Han Li. On top of that, they were able to make use of the teleportation formations that the devilish army had already seized control of to aid in their pursuit of Han Li, and as a result, he was constantly kept on his toes. It was often the case that he would immediately depart from a place after recovering around 30% to 40% of his magic power, not daring to stay any longer than that. Even so, he was still almost cut off by the 3 Shui Guang clones on several occasions. Thankfully, his intuition as a body integration cultivator saved on him those occasions, alerting him and allowing him to get away just in the nick of time. As such, Han Li was naturally becoming more and more cautious, and he was forced to abandon his plans of traveling to other major human settlements, including the Holy Sovereign City and the 4 True Spirit families, choosing to flee elsewhere instead. In the other directions, the number of devilish troops was drastically diminished, and the time it took for the 3 Shui Guang clones to get to him began to increase. This gave Han Li a lot more respite, and he was able to meditate for longer periods of time, thereby allowing him to gradually recover his magic power. Unfortunately, this didn't last long. 3 months later, Yuan Cha suddenly reappeared alongside the 3 Shui Guang clones, and they immediately set off after him in hot pursuit, not affording him any opportunity for respite. It was often the case that they would get to him when he had only been cultivating at a certain place for around 4 to 6 hours, and he would be forced to flee again. Thankfully, there weren't many other devilish beings nearby, so he was always able to make his escape relatively easily. However, during the next month, the 4 sacred ancestor clones were always hot on his heels no matter where he went, and he finally realized that something was wrong. The 4 sacred ancestor clones seemed to have a method of determining his approximate location. It clearly wasn't very accurate, but it was enough to render him unable to shake them off. Yuan Cha was clearly the one who held the key to this tracking method, and she had only just recently obtained it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to get away so easily in the past. Han Li employed a few more methods to try and shake off his pursuers, all to no avail, and his heart sank further and further. As such, he became even more cautious and began to take routes that would take him further and further away from the devilish beings in the area. Thus, time passed by one day after another, and they began to approach the border of the human territory. This area was very close to the primordial world, and ancient beasts were often able to force their way through the restrictions here, so no human cities had been established in the area. As such, this was also the most barren and desolate part of the human territory. Without any human settlements here, there obviously wouldn't be any devilish armies situated here either. With Han Li's incredible speed, there were very few high-grade devilish beasts that had been able to keep up with him and the 4 sacred ancestor clones, and the only ones that had been able to keep up were only able to do so as they had been drawn into Shui Guang's giant jade plate. Han Li continued to hurtle through the air as a streak of light with a dark expression. With his current level of magic power, it was unwise to continue to maintain his Kunpeng form, so he could only revert back to his human form. At this point, he had already been fleeing for over half a year, and his constant changes in direction made the 4 sacred ancestor clones unable to chase him down, but even with his resolute will, having to flee for his life for so long was taking a heavy mental toll on him. However, he was now even more determined to continue fleeing and engage his pursuers in a battle of attrition. There was no way that the 4 sacred ancestor clones could keep this up forever. They had to be expending just as much magic power as he was, and they also wouldn't have had much time to recover their magic power. High up in the air millions of kilometers away from Han Li, a stone hall and a giant plate were hurtling through the air. Within the jade plate, the 3 Shui Guang clones were standing before the crystalline wall, discussing something with Yuan Cha, whose image was being depicted on the wall. So you're still unwilling to enter our all-encompassing plate, fellow Taoist Yuan Cha? You should be just as aware as I am how much magic power we're expending by separately controlling flying treasures like this. I descended into this realm in quite a hurry, so I'm not carrying many magic power regeneration pills. I managed to get some from my subordinates, but after flying for this long, those pills have almost all been used up as well. At this rate, there's no guarantee that we'll be able to outlast that human brat. We don't know how many regenerative pills he's carrying. Even now, he's still displaying no signs of magic power exhaustion. I'm sure you're not carrying many regenerative pills either, right, fellow Taoist? In that case, it would be wise of us to fly in one treasure together so we can take turns resting, one of the Shui Guang clones urged. I naturally have no objections to this, but why can't you 3 come to my stone hall? Why do you insist on making me enter your all-encompassing plate? Yuan Cha asked. Why ask a question you already know the answer to? The cultivation arts we're using contradict with the protective stone chi cultivated by the stone devil race. If we try to meditate and recover our magic power in your stone devil hall, the effect will be minimal. Hence, it's much better for you to come into our all-encompassing plate, Shui Guang insisted. Is that so? I'm more concerned that you'll unleash the power of your all-encompassing plate on me if I were to enter it. You're renowned in our sacred realm for devouring the blood essence and magic power of others, so don't tell me that something like this is beneath you, Yuan Cha chuckled coldly, completely doing away with all semblance of pleasantries. You're overthinking things, fellow Taoist. Both of us only have our clones here. If I were to do that, your true body definitely wouldn't let me get away with it. Shui Guang sighed in a resigned manner. I wouldn't be so sure about that. What you're saying makes some sense, but I'm still not willing to take the risk. Perhaps this clone of mine doesn't possess enough blood essence and magic power to tempt you, but if we take into consideration the chaotic yin-yang qi and devil sealing lock that's currently in the Han brat's possession, even I would be tempted to do something radical, Yuan Cha said as a mocking sneer appeared on her face. The three Shui Guang clones' expressions changed slightly upon hearing this, and they glanced at another before one of them asked, Chaotic yin-yang qi and devil sealing lock? What are you talking about? Why play these childish little games, Shui Guang? I saw that Han brat extracting chaotic yin-yang qi from the devil sealing lock using the earthly hellish flames. I heard that there was a very good chance that the devil sealing lock had fallen into your hands. It seems that the rumors were true. I don't know how you managed to lose the treasure to a human, but you sent your three clones into this realm for the chaotic yin-yang qi, right? Yuan Cha chuckled coldly in response. Seeing as you've already figured everything else, then I won't keep this from you any longer. What are you going to do? Are you going to inform Lu Ji and the others of this? Shui Guang asked in a cold voice. Chaotic yin-yang qi is extremely important to sacred ancestors like us. I'm not going to let even more people know about it. My condition is very simple. I can give you the devil sealing lock and half of the chaotic yin-yang qi, but you have to give me the remaining chaotic yin-yang qi as well as all of the treasures that are being carried by that Han brat, Yuan Cha replied. You sure are asking for a lot. Setting aside everything else, that brat took my purple word cauldron as well. I have to recover that no matter what, Shui Guang harumphed coldly. Yuan Cha was rather taken aback to hear this. The purple word cauldron was taken by him as well? That's rather surprising to hear. In that case you can have the cauldron as well. Alright then, it's settled. We've forged an alliance. Isn't it about time you showed me the tracking method you're using to pursue that brat? Shui Guang asked. Even if you learned the method, you wouldn't be able to replicate it, Yuan Cha said in an indifferent voice. How will I know whether I can replicate it if you don't tell me? Shui Guang chuckled. If you really want to know, then I'll tell you. Remember how I remained behind to deal with the clone of that human brat? Yuan Ch asked. Of course. You remained there for a few months and didn't mention it at all after meeting up with me. Could it be that this tracking method has something to do with that clone of his? Shui Guang asked. Indeed. That clone is actually one of his nascent souls. Even though it's only at the late spatial tempering stage, it's cultivated several powerful life-saving abilities. Even after chasing it for so long, I was still unable to stop it from self-detonating and escaping as countless wisps of soul fragments. In the end, I was only able to capture one of the soul fragments, Yuan Cha said with a grim expression. What? A spatial tempering stage nascent soul managed to escape from you? Shui Guang was quite stunned to hear this, and all three clones exchanged astonished glances. Like I said, the nascent soul had cultivated several powerful life-saving abilities and was also carrying a few profound talismans. I was too complacent and allowed it to get away. With that nascent soul's powers, as long as most of it manages to gather together again, it should be able to recover back to its original form. If I hadn't been in a hurry to meet back up with you, I would have definitely spent some more time and destroyed all of those soul fragments. However, even with this single soul fragment, I'm able to use my Great Origin Devil technique to track his location. I've already refined that soul fragment into my own body, so I'm able to sense his approximate location from afar. Unfortunately, I don't have a second soul fragment for you to replicate this tracking method. In any case, this tracking method has a huge margin for error and only points out an approximate direction, which is why that human brat is able to continue to evade us, Yuan Cha explained. A soul fragment is required? I have a similar secret technique, but it looks like I won't be able to replicate the tracking method after all. If I had known this in advance, I would have stayed with you for a few more days to help you capture that nascent soul. A regretful look appeared on Shui Guang's face as he spoke. If you had done that, then perhaps that human brat would have gotten away. Even a second nascent soul of his is so difficult to capture. I can only imagine how slippery he's going to be, Yuan Cha said with a shake of her head. Humph, no matter how tricky he is, he must be close to completely exhausting his magic power and spiritual sense after being pursued by us for so long. Without any power at his disposal, he won't be able to use any of his tricks, Shui Guang harumphed coldly. I recall you said the exact same thing 2 months ago, but he's still as lively as ever. In contrast, we're the ones who are struggling to keep up, Yuan Cha said as a slightly self-derogatory look appeared on her face. A slightly awkward look appeared on Shui Guang's face upon hearing this. That's only because neither of us expected him to be carrying so many magic power regeneration pills. We're unable to track down his exact location, so we can only keep chasing him like this. As soon as he exhausts all of his magic power, we'll be able to capture him with ease. Indeed. He's still traveling quite quickly now, but he's far slower than he was in the beginning. It looks like he truly is close to exhausting his magic power, Yuan Cha replied with a nod. This is why I'm inviting you into my all-encompassing plate. If we control this treasure together, we'll be able to maintain our current speed while significantly decreasing our magic power expenditure, Shui Guang said in a hopeful manner.